Please welcome to the Intersect stage, Jason Oxman, President and CEO, ITI.
Well, good morning and welcome to the third edition of the Intersect. On behalf of the entire ITI team, it is my great pleasure to welcome you here this morning, and we are glad you joined us. I'm Jason Oxman, the President and CEO of ITI, the Information Technology Industry Council. ITI is proud to represent the world's most innovative companies and to be a global advocate for the technology industry. This is, without question, a pivotal time in the tech sector and in the world of tech policy. And the important conversations that we're going to have today could not be more timely. Now, we know, thinking back, that 2024 was the most significant election season the world has ever seen, even though it seems a long time ago. It wasn't that long ago. And of course, more than half the world's population in 2024 had the opportunity to elect new leaders. Now, we're moving from election season to implementation season. And today, you'll have the opportunity to hear directly from policymakers and from industry experts about how they're navigating the evolving landscape of technology. Conversations that we're going to have today will focus on four key areas. We're going to talk about AI, cybersecurity, economic security, and trade and investment. Now, we invite everyone in the audience here physically in the room with us and those online to join in the conversation. You'll find us on LinkedIn, on X, as ITI_tech_tweets. And please add the hashtag, the Intersect 2025, to your posts as you share your thoughts and observations and conversations about the day. Also, throughout the program today, we're going to have the opportunity to let you interact with some polling questions that you'll see on the screens around us. The first one will pop up right now, and you can access the polls using the QR code that is directly on the screen, or there's also a QR code on your lanyard that you can use as well. The room is full of expertise, so we will make sure to give you all an opportunity to interact with one another over the course of the day today, to make connections to others in the audience. We think that's incredibly important. And we want to thank all of you for being with us today. We also want to thank the ITI member companies who have made the Intersect possible for you today. And those companies are Accenture, Amazon, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Ericsson, MasterCard, NetApp, Nielsen, Qualcomm, Sage, Salesforce, Schneider Electric, Siemens, and Tenable. Thank you to all of those great ITI member companies for making the Intersect possible. Now, we have a packed speaker lineup, and it's time to get going. I could think of no better way to start our day in conversation about the intersection of AI, tech policy, and energy than to welcome the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, Chairman Brett Guthrie. Please join me in welcoming Chairman Guthrie to the stage.
Great to be here.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you
for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here on this beautiful stage at this beautiful venue with
It is beautiful.
all of these beautiful people arrayed
It's hard to
before us.
see, but I'm sure they are. It's the lights are in my eyes, but yeah, I have no doubt they all are.
That's what makes them beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being
funny.
here.
It is kind of like being on the Merv Griffin show. I'm showing my age, isn't it? Yeah.
It feel that way, doesn't it? Or we could say Donahue if we want to do
Donahue.
to stay in that
Donahue got to walk through the audience.
Well, that's true too, and then do the microphone thing that he used to do. Well, thanks for being here. I know you've got an incredibly packed schedule, and we're grateful for your time today. As I said, no better conversation than with you on the intersection of AI and energy, and that's where I want to start. Commerce Committee, under your leadership, is very focused on opportunities for the U.S. to lead the world in AI, and there are a lot of elements wrapped up in that. I think it was your predecessor, Chairman John Dingell, who used to talk about the Energy and Commerce Committee's jurisdiction. If it moves, it's energy. If it doesn't, it's commerce. So you've got it all.
Everything, yeah.
How are exactly. You? Tell us how you're thinking about all these important issues.
Well, my corollary to the Dingell comment, the Dingell corollary is it takes energy to move commerce. True. So you have to have both. And so this is April, so we say you can't spell April without AI. So we're kind of focusing on this and our energy. So it's interesting, those who are kind of creatures of Washington, a lot of every 2 years we get picked on for having too much jurisdiction. They say, oh, energy commerce is too big. So we have energy, environment, telecom, we have healthcare, we have the commerce side, which means we have time, so the changes of time, and NFL, so and NIL and college sports. So we have a lot. But this is really where it kind of overlaps. And there's AI in healthcare, so we can claim that. But the big issues are the energy that it's going to take to drive AI. And I'm kind of a creature. My professional life isn't healthcare, but I was on the healthcare subcommittee, chaired the healthcare subcommittee, kind of my rise to where I am now. And as I was kind of running for this and moving, I said, I've got a lot more to do than healthcare. And I went to a Library of Congress meeting, and they had Eric Schmidt, not the senator, but the Google Eric Schmidt. And he wrote a book, Genesis, with Henry Kissinger about AI. And it just struck me that we have to win the battle for the platform for AI. He didn't say this, but I took away, somebody's going to control, because everything has to talk. So there's going to be an architecture that's going to develop, and it's not going to be controlled by Europe, because Europe has chosen not to compete in this, by their regulatory and their energy policy. So there's a very good signal there. So if you look back, and if you heard Eric talk, we have to have energy. Bill Gates will tell you it takes as much energy for some Microsoft data centers as it does to run the city of Seattle. So you start putting that into perspective. And so if we don't produce the energy, if we don't get the regulatory environment right, we're going to lose the platform. And the only other person playing in it, because Europe's not, because of their choices they've made, is China. Yeah. And so it really is an existential threat to the country, the world, on who controls the platform for AI. And you'll hear a lot of the people involved in this say, we have the brain power, we have the capital, we have to have the right regulatory environment, and we have to have the energy.
Yeah. So let's drill down on that energy piece that you've highlighted. I've heard you comment on this a couple of times when talking about the AI issue, to remind everybody that energy is really the important backbone behind it. You've suggested that by 2028, we're going to need 2 to 3 times the electricity producing power in the United States because
that's pretty
of the
quick,
demands.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's only 3 years away.
3 years away.
You've highlighted this risk and the need for Congress to take action to make sure that the grid can support these massive data centers that are going to power AI and power U.S. leadership. What can we look to?
Well, the most important thing is we need all sources of energy. You can't pick winners and losers. That's what Europe did. Germany denuclearized. Yep. And their price of energy in Germany is 3 times higher than the rest of the world. You just can't compete when you make those by decisions politicians made. Yeah. And so we can't make those same decisions. And there are people that'll look at that and say, well, they just didn't do it right. We can do it better. I don't know. It looks like it's a failure, their policies have been, and I'd hate to go down that same path. So the first thing we have to do is not take available energy offline. There's still, coal plants and others that is cleaner, that are targeted to come offline. We have to keep things online. And then we have to, permitting reform, we have to be able to produce it quicker. And wind and solar is part of the mix. You can actually produce wind and solar quicker than you can get a natural gas plant built and in place because of some of the supply chain issues just getting that. So it's part of it. But if wind and solar is 10% of our mix, which it is today, and you double it, it would just be 20% of the mix. We need more. I mean, it's just not sufficient. And so, and then in kind of the longer run, we have to look at expanding our nuclear. Nuclear is carbon free, and we just have to have the right regulatory environment to do it. And that's actually what we're going to dig in on. And that's what whether it's environment subcommittee, our energy subcommittee, our telecom subcommittee, has all been focused on this. And we're building this to a hearing we're going to have next week. And so after going to hear the presentation of the book Genesis, we've got Eric Schmidt coming next Wednesday to testify before a committee on AI, the need for energy, the need to, the national security implications, the world security implications of ceding this to China. And so we got Eric Schmidt is coming. We also have Manish Bhatia, who is the executive vice president at Micron. And then we also have Alexander Wang for Scale AI going to testify. And it's going to be the importance of AI in the global platform. Because, friends, we had a hearing yesterday in our oversight. There's a medical device that was found. There was a Chinese-made medical device that when they got into it had a link to a university in Beijing. So they're taking data. I mean, they're taking data. You can't trust anything that comes from them. So imagine if they control the platform for AI. Yeah. You think it would just do it for the good of the world, or you think they're going to do it for their own interests? And I think the jury's out. And the jury's not out on that.
Right. Important questions to be asking. Well, this hearing sounds very exciting. Looking forward to it. I actually had the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee on trade and manufacturing on AI and manufacturing. You were kind enough to be there and share your observations about these issues. And I wanted to ask you just about something you mentioned in your comment about how we get the energy infrastructure out there. You mentioned nuclear and the importance of alternatives, but we need an all-above the approach. You mentioned permitting. And one of the challenges that the energy industry constantly highlights, and obviously this is now an issue for the tech industry as well, for our partners in energy, is the permitting process. And a lot of it is under the federal government's control, but most of it isn't. A lot of it is state or even local. A lot of it is environmental related. A lot of well-meaning local government officials, state officials, trying to control the permitting process. But we hear these stories of just these massive multi-year delays on these projects because of all of that. You mentioned permitting as one of the issues that's core to this, and I'm just wondering how you think about your ability, Congress's ability to step in, the administration's ability to step in and address these multi-layer of government challenges.
Well, there's two things. One, the permitting, there's some things we can do, very limited in the reconciliation process. And while we can't do more, you have to let a senator explain that to you. The House can do it. It takes the Senate to agree. The Senate parliamentarian, it's a reconciliation, kind of an ancient process to get around a rule. And so we have to do permitting reform. So what I've tried to do, and my reason for bringing Eric Schmidt, I think he has credibility with everybody and the others, because of the worst. Hearings are important when you get somebody from a conservative-leaning, because we're the majority, so we get 3 and they get 1. So you get 3 conservative-leaning think tank people talk about how important this is. Then you get a left-wing think tank person, we still have to do climate change, and so we can't do all of this.
That sounds like the hearing I testified
I know, exactly. And what I want to do is people that the world respects, that both sides respect, to come before. That's what this hearing was building up to, so they can come and explain, here's the choice. So there's more than 2 choices. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss, put me down for anti-Putin if you want. I can quote me on that. But so if you really look at, if you look at the existential threats of the world, is it climate change? Is it who controls AI? And it's not bipolar. I get it, it's more than just 2-dimensional. But if you kind of look at it that way with energy policy, and then you say, okay, we're going to focus on the climate change side of it and do what Europe did, well, then you're just seeding AI. That you're seeding that, but you can't have both because it takes energy. And so all of a sudden then it's going to go to China, and then you think China's not going to produce the energy it takes to drive it. They're doing it now. They're building a coal-fired plant every 2 weeks, and so you lose both. And so that's the kind of what I want to say, because what we need to get to, I was with some people today in the building industry, and they say, if you're investing in a power plant, it's a 30-year investment. If you're investing in just general business, you usually want a 5-year return on your investment. And if things change every 2 years, then how are you going to make a long-term investment? So what I want to do is bring people before our committee to get bipartisan buy-in. I know there are going to be people that aren't ever going to say we can do it 100% with wind and solar. They're going to be those people. But I think most people realize you can't. And so what we need to, whatever policy we do, it needs to show significant bipartisan support. So people who are going to make the investment decisions, if we get to where we want to go, will say this is going to be here to stay for quite some time, so we can deploy the capital to do what we need to do to be successful.
Yeah, you've mentioned China a couple of times, and I think you're absolutely right to highlight that as the kind of existential risk to getting this all wrong.
We got China and Europe.
Yeah.
And they got us.
Yep.
So,
yep. Yeah. And Europe has certainly taken a very regulatory approach, which they're actually rethinking to their credit.
And we need them.
We'll
we need a strong Europe. I'm one that we want a strong. We need a strong Europe.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We need a strong Europe.
Absolutely. In the 118th, there was a great AI task force. Not clear what happens with that going forward. That Mr. Obernolte, who's on your committee, and Ted Lieu co-led. They produced a terrific report, a very lengthy report that had a lot of recommendations in it. too many to talk about in the 3 minutes that we have left here. But I wanted to ask you, just thinking ahead to the rest of the 119th, obviously energy and commerce is where the AI discussion is going to be centered. You mentioned a hearing that you're going to have on these issues, but given the threat of what happens if AI isn't led by the U.S., the geopolitical challenges that you've mentioned, what do you see yourself asking the committee to really focus their time and effort on in the coming months? What do you need from industry to come talk to your committee members about the issues?
I mean, if you believe that energy is necessary, if you believe, one, that winning the battle for AI, who controls the architecture is important, and energy is essential to that, then make the case to members. We need people say, we don't need people to just say, okay, I'll vote for that because I got a trade-off here or there. We need people really to believe it so that we can signal to the people who are going to deploy the capital to do this that it's the right place to put their capital, because they're going to get a return on, they're going to do it for return on investment. My interest is for security of the world. And so we have to have, either we're going to have a government that does it like China, which we're not, or we're going to have the private sector do it, which I think will be better and superior. But they're not going to deploy their capital if they think there's not going to be some kind of return. They can't depend on the policymakers here in Washington. So that's why I'm trying to build this kind of bipartisan sense. And so there's going to be some trade-offs. So I know that you have people on the other side of the aisle for me who find transmission. They still believe in the wind and solar, which I'd say is part of the mix, but as a bigger part, we'll build solar farms in Arizona and transmit the power to New York. Well, there's a lot of issues with that. But if they will vote for permitting reform on other things to get the transmission permitting reform needed, I think we need to look at that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. AI is obviously an issue that a lot of Americans are thinking about in terms of jobs and what it means for them.
It's such a big term.
It
means so many. Then the question is it going to be AI become like Westworld, the movie, where the computers, there's people that have that concern with it.
Yeah.
I'm not so much concerned, but it's the raw computing power that allows us to. I was talking with Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, and he was talking about how you can go in and mine AI and you train. So if somebody has an AI model, you can go distill. You can take your model to go in and pick out of their model what you want. So China's going to do that to us. So we're going to have the ability to do that to them as well.
Not the kind of distilling you're usually looking at.
No, he used a Kentucky term when he said that. They got AI distilling.
Do you think he did that on purpose?
I don't know. I think, well, Kentucky sort of invented the distilling of corn, not of AI.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you to
we didn't invent the corn, but we made it better. That's what I mean. The distilling of corn.
Absolutely right.
I think that goes way back in the.
I can't think of any better use than 51% of corn going into bourbon. Last question to you is, what are you hearing from the folks back home about these technology innovations and what they can mean for them? What are the things that you want us to be talking to the people of Kentucky about?
We're trying to drive that. I don't think the average Kentuckian wakes up every day, we got to win the battle for AI. And that's why it's important. That's why we have the type government we have, that we come and make these decisions and try to explain it to people when we're home. I will tell you that you've got a local Chamber of Commerce people saying, my area is kind of booming. I'm Bowling Green. We're one of those, mid-south towns that just seems to be hitting on all eights right now. We're kind of in Metro Atlanta. I don't want to say it, Metro Nashville. And so my son was in Metro Atlanta, so I said that. And then Metro Nashville was kind of part of the Nashville boom and growth. And so we're now limited on growth due to the grid, availability of the grid. We had a new battery plant come in, took up a lot of grid, which is great. And so people are concerned about, we had the polar vortex a couple of years ago where we had rolling blackouts in a TVA area, which, you thought power would be limitless. And so we're trying to explain that to people, and people say that. So in this area, people get the need for power. And I try to explain it. I mean, if you say a Microsoft data center not all, but can use as much power as the city of Seattle, that really puts it into perspective. And you think how cities develop over, a few pioneers show up and then it grows, and then so you build the grid as it grows. Now we're talking about building the grid for one data. And then if you're building a power station and you got one customer who's going to use as much as the city, and you got to invest this for that, we got to figure that part of it out too, and make sure that we have the right policies in place to incentivize that.
Well, ITI and the tech industry look forward to working with you.
We look forward to it. I'm excited.
Very fortunate to have you in this.
It's absolutely exciting. And so you're going to see energy and commerce, we've been all healthcare for a while. I had Affordable Care Act, Repeal and Replace, Inflation Reduction Act. Now we're dealing with reconciliation, and that's all important. But you're going to see a big focus coming out of the committee on how do we marry energy with technology to make sure we don't get left behind.
Well, we appreciate your leadership on those important issues and look forward to supporting your work. Please join me in thanking Chairman Brett Guthrie.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Joining us now, Bob Huber, Chief Security Officer at Tenable.
Morning, everyone. We're going to try to keep this moving here. So you can tell I don't live in the D.C. metro area anymore. I live in Colorado, so I'm the only one wearing jeans. I didn't bring my cowboy boots, though, so we have that. So I'm the Chief Security Officer, President of Tenable Public Sector. We're a cyber exposure management company, if you've heard of us. We're honored to be here today to be a part of some great discussions around the next year of tech policy. I want to personally invite you folks to join us after today's sessions. 4 o'clock, we have a reception. You can mingle with policy decision makers, tech industry innovators as well. Come grab a drink, and rumor has it we'll have a surprise or two for you there. In the meantime, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce your presenters for the next session. And I will say I'm recovering U.S. Cyber Command, so it is a pleasure for me to do this. Please give a warm welcome to Jason Oxman, President and CEO of ITI, and Morgan Adamski, Executive Director of U.S. Cyber Command.
Well, hello.
Hi.
And welcome. Welcome to the Intersect. It's great to have you here.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming all the way downtown for us and for the tech industry. So we're thrilled to have you here. A lot to talk about, but I think the first thing that's most important is U.S. Cyber Command. Everyone here is in the tech industry, so pretty familiar with it, but let's just situate it within the government and the role that you play across the cyber operations of so many different agencies and operations.
Yeah, absolutely. So U.S. Cyber Command, Functional Geographic Command, it really is, it's located at Fort Meade. It has 3 core missions that I think a lot of people, when they think about U.S. Cyber Command, they think about countering malicious cyber actors. That is actually one of our missions. We call that defending the homeland. It is one thing that we focus on a lot when we think about all the cyber actors that are attacking our U.S. critical infrastructure. That's a core mission that we execute. The second one is defense of the DoD information network. That is really our cyber defense mission. The DoDIN, our DoD information network, as I said, is a massive network that our warfighters use to communicate and do things every single day. So it's really critically important that we keep that secure. And then the third mission is support the joint force. And what that really means is we are developing capabilities that will support other geographic combatant commands, so PACOM, so Admiral Paparo, that's what we're doing. And so we have a core mission in doing a lot of that work every single day.
So you've been in government in a cyber role for a very long time, came up through NSA, and you've been the executive director here at Cybercom for almost a year, maybe 10 months now?
Almost a year.
Almost a year, okay. Coming up on that important anniversary
Yes.
in June. So I wanted to ask you to unpack a couple of those areas of focus that you talked about. Let's start with the Department of Defense. You noted the important defensive capabilities for DoD networks, but there's also an offensive capability that's wrapped up in that as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the importance of having both a good offensive and defensive mission, right? So when we think about how do we protect our core networks from a DoD perspective, from cyber attacks, cyber intrusions, what we're really doing every single day is being able to learn how our adversaries are honing their tradecraft, what they're doing and what infrastructure they're using to attack us. And really, we'll be able to take that information and say, okay, is this an effective method to be able to gain access to a network? Is it something that we should be thinking about in terms of how do we better position deterring our adversaries in cyberspace and using those capabilities against them every single day as well, right? It's a constant game of being able to hone our tradecraft, but also ensuring we're protecting against it at the same time.
So there's an international component to the mission as well, because obviously a lot of these cyber adversaries are outside the US. A lot of them are government funded by adversary governments. That's a lot to take on. So I don't know if you can even begin to tell us how you prioritize all of these different segments that you're working on, but perhaps you can share at least the philosophy behind prioritizing the workload, given that the US government itself and all of our critical infrastructure is under constant attack.
Yeah, ruthless prioritization is what we really focus on. And so, right, President Trump, SecDef, HeadSeth, they've really set some clear priorities for us. US Cyber Command being a military command, we figure out what the priorities are, we align resources, and we execute mission, right? So for us right now, it's defending the homeland, right? So how do we secure the border? How do we provide that support we need to do from a cyber perspective? How do we deter China in the Indo-Pacific? And then lastly, how do we really look at burden sharing with all our allies and partners against all threats? And so those are the three priorities we're really focusing on. But to your point, our China adversaries are everywhere. And so what that means to us is how do we work with our partners and allies to say, okay, here's what we're able to do from a capacity and capability perspective. Here's what we understand the threat to be, and how do we enable them to be successful at stopping that threat as well. So for US Cyber Command at the tactical level, that means how are we engaging in our hunt forward operations? So for those of you that are not familiar, that's how we deploy forces out to work with our allies and partners to secure their networks in country. We work side by side with them. We've deployed over 80 times in the past year, which is pretty significant. And we've been able to say, hey, let's work together, let's find the adversary, let's learn about their tradecraft, but let's also secure this network to ensure you have the ability to do this in the future. And that's a little bit of our burden sharing and costs with our allies to ensure they have that capability to defend themselves as well.
Okay, so how do you, I'm going to use the word we to mean government and the private sector. How do we keep track of all of these threats? How do we, I mean, they're shifting constantly. There's a proliferation. Vanna, I'd like to buy a vowel. There's
a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
There's a lot of them.
Anybody watch Severance and see the performance review of Mr. Milchick, where he was accused of using too many big words? It's a great show. Highly recommend it on Apple TV, an ITI member company. There are a lot of threats out there, and we need to spend time together in partnership between government and the private sector on these threats. How do we even begin to wrap our arms around this increasing threat level?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we do when we talk about working with our private sector and even our international partners is we really just have an honest conversation about here's our priorities, here's where we're putting a significant amount of our capacity, or where we have specific interest in ensuring we understand what the threat is and how to protect against it. And we say, are our priorities aligned? Right? Are we working the same things? Are we working different things? And in a case where we say, okay, we need to cover all the things, we say, okay, are you able to do this work if we're able to do this work? And really what that comes down to is having an open and transparent conversation about, hey, let's work this together, right? Let's make sure we understand where we're putting our resources against. How are we sharing information as quickly as humanly possible so that we can track the comprehensive picture of all the threats that are attacking us every single day? And then if I understand what your priorities are and I have information that may help you, I'm able to get that to you faster. But at times, we don't necessarily have the most clear and concise discussions on what those priorities are, and we need to be able to create avenues and mechanisms to be able to do that faster because that's the pace of cyberspace right now, and the threats are coming at us every single day.
Indeed. So let's talk about those avenues and mechanisms, both formal and informal, for your partnership and work with the private sector. Great ITI member companies like Tenable, who we heard from before, and CrowdStrike, who we'll hear from later this afternoon, are obviously cybersecurity-focused companies that want to and do indeed partner with the government to address these threats. And I think it's safe to say that neither the private sector nor the government can do it all on their own.
Right.
So tell us about the channels that are active for the private sector to coordinate with the work of Cybercom or other entities within government, either formal or informal, that we should all be taking advantage of and participating in to help you and support the mission.
Yeah, so how we work with the private sector from a US Cyber Command perspective is going to be one of our key initiatives this year. When we think about the types of avenues and mechanisms by which we work with them, I think we break it down a little bit into we have the cooperative relationships, we're doing information sharing. There's an element called under advisement in the Cyber National Mission Force, which is actually a team of technical experts that are out working with industry every single day to see whether there's opportunities to share information information that we can share to them, because it needs to be both ways, our information they may have to help us better understand our adversaries and opportunities to get after them. There's also contractual mechanisms, right? There's information sharing within contracts. So we already have this great vendor base of a lot of companies who we're working with from a contractual perspective, but we can use those mechanisms to share information as well. But the last piece, which I think is really going to be important to US Cyber Command going forward, is just how do we rapidly integrate capabilities, information, and technical expertise from the private sector into all of our big operational requirements that we're receiving from the Department of Defense. Most of the people in the private sector, and I don't want to speak for all of you, but you guys are used to potentially coming to industry days where you get a series of requirements that maybe aren't that helpful at times because you need to talk to the operational user. We want to create more mechanisms where we actually have the operational community, the test community, being able to sit side by side with the private sector to say, here's our hard problems. Not necessarily, here's something I need, but to say, here's our hard problems, so we can have an honest conversation on what are the opportunities to potentially think in innovative and different approaches from a capabilities perspective.
On the subject of coming to government with great ideas about products that could be helpful to supporting the mission, I want to ask you about artificial intelligence.
Yep.
We heard from Chairman Guthrie a few minutes ago about the focus on Capitol Hill, about making sure the US remains the world leader in AI, and he highlighted, I think correctly, that there are national security implications to our failure to do so. So I want to ask you about the AI race in the context of tools that you can make use of to address cyber threats. Obviously, our adversaries are trying to race to develop and deploy the best AI tools at the same time, so it behooves us to get them out first and get them out better. Can you share with us your perspective on how AI technology tools are helping advance the mission and what you're looking for from industry to help develop and deploy those tools?
Yeah, so US Cyber Command has a significant investment in AI going on right now. So in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2023, we were directed to create an AI roadmap with the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. And so we created this 5-year roadmap that outlined about 100 different tasks of all the things that we need to do to be able to integrate AI from a capabilities perspective, as well as build up technical expertise. In the past year, we established the AI Task Force in the Cyber National Mission Force, which is essentially the operational element that is actually taking LLMs and AI technology today and using it in multiple different missions across space. And they're doing it in 90-day cycles. So they use the technology, they deploy it, they test it, they see what works, and they say, hey, this has been successful. We want to scale this out to the broader enterprise. And so for us, when we think about it both in all of our missions, defend the homeland, support the joint force, and defend the DoD information network, we're looking at it, so how do we increase the efficiency of our analysts and operators that are using AI technology to do their jobs? Anyone that works in cybersecurity, if you're working on the manual side, so a lot of times they'll say, hey, it'll take us hours, days, weeks to be able to analyze specific traffic, specific lines of code. We've now been able to leverage AI to be able to get through that in minutes and hours, which is a really significant investment for us. And we've been able to do it in terms of our defend the nation and offensive mission, as well as our defensive mission. So that's been really key for us. We're looking at AI technology and how do we deploy it enterprise-wise for defending the DoD information network. So continuous monitoring is really key for us. And so we've already taken a ton of that, integrated it, and started to use it, and now we're going to look to scale it.
Really interesting. I hesitate to ask you this follow-up question because I know I might trip over something that you're not allowed to talk about.
It's great.
But if you can think of a specific use case of AI that you've seen successfully deployed, either at US Cyber Command or elsewhere in government, I just think it's always helpful for us to be able to talk when we're talking on Capitol Hill or talking to other arms of administration officials about those use cases and how it's really helping with the mission. So hopefully I bought you enough time in this long-winded question to think of something that you're allowed to talk about. Are there specific use cases or a specific use case or maybe a specific area where AI was really proving crucial to the mission?
So sure, I'm going to take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So what I would offer is that, so US Cyber Command has a really close relationship with DARPA. We run a program called Constellation. The Constellation program is meant to essentially cover the valley of death. So both Cyber Command and DARPA make an investment into this program. And we say, hey, we want to work with vendors, performers to be able to say, here's a capability that we could deploy in the AI space. Let's use it, test it from MVP to FOC, and let's fund it. Through that program, we actually have a capability that is the continuous monitoring of DoD DODIN. It essentially allows us to put it in specific places within DODIN that essentially has indicators from what we know our adversaries are using. We can monitor the traffic that's going through that specific choke point, and then we've been able to determine and identify malicious activity that we haven't seen before. That capability is known as TACMS. It breaks into continuous monitoring system, but it is something that we've deployed and seen great success from, and something we hope to scale.
Very interesting, thank you. So in the time we have left, a couple more things I want to talk about. One is other technologies that you're excited about and other things you might see in the next kind of 3 to 5 year time horizon, even beyond AI. And then I want to talk about workforce, because I know for the private sector and for government together, workforce issues are enormously important, and getting a trained cyber workforce in particular. But let's talk about other technologies. So we talked about AI, and everyone's excited about AI, and it's obviously all anybody wants to talk about. But of course, it can't be the only tool that you deploy. So just kind of thinking about your technology roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years, what are some other areas of technology innovation that you're interested in seeing introduced into the tools that are used?
Oh, from the tools we use from a Cyber Command perspective, right? Some of it is just basic foundational capabilities. It's right, how do we run our business acquisition? How do we run a lot of our management, our talent management of our people? We're looking for a lot of those significant capabilities. How do we incorporate it into multiple different fabrics across US Cyber Command? What I mean by fabrics is whether it's in a classified environment or an unclassified environment. But for us, when we think about technologies, one of the key things that we're most interested in is that when you talk about defending the DoD information network or providing mission assurance to those combatant commanders that are operating potentially in contested areas, a lot of their dependencies rely on infrastructure that is related not just IT, but OT, so operational technologies. And so we are looking for ways that we're going to be able to monitor and secure OT at scale, and we're going to be able to do it in a contested environment that maybe we haven't before. And so a lot of investment right now on how do we better leverage the private sector's expertise in that area to say, okay, what do they know about it, what's out there, and how do we use it from a commercial perspective versus creating something that's bespoke.
Makes sense. Last question and last topic is the workforce.
Yeah.
You're obviously very focused in your executive director role of attracting the best and the brightest into government. So I want to hear about how that's going and how your efforts to inspire the next generation of cyber experts to come serve their country, how that goes and how that's going. But I also want to ask you more broadly about the cyber workforce. We hear about 700,000 open positions across the cybersecurity industry in the country, and the need to find alternative channels of educational recruitment for those jobs. What's your assessment of the current state of the cyber workforce?
Yeah, so for us, right, it's really amazing. I'm very proud of the Cyber Command workforce right now. They are very committed to the mission and the priorities and continuing to attract talent and people to come work with us. We do find that the people that are really interested really love the mission, right? So that's really what's driving a lot of our recruitment efforts. People that want to come help follow through on defending our nation, that's key. Making sure our warfighters come home, that's a really important mission that a lot of people care about. And understanding the importance that cybersecurity and integrating specific technologies. People that want to come work for us want to have cool things to play with all day. They want to have the best and brightest, and they want to have the best technology there is out in the world. And so we've got to figure out a way to get that more integrated into our government systems as quickly as possible, because that's going to help us to continue to attract that talent. And so, again, a lot of people, a lot of interest. We continue to recruit, right? We want people to come work with us. We think it's going to be valuable. We want to have people from different backgrounds because that's really going to make us successful from an innovation perspective. And so as we bring in that talent, one of the key things, though, that we want to make sure we have from the US Cyber Command perspective and the cyber workforce as a whole is we want to make sure we retain them as well. So we want to make sure they have the right training, they're able to go out and talk to industry and leverage all the opportunities that are out there. And so we're working really hard right now to say what's new and creative ways that we can bring in that training pipeline, allow them to go out and go to conferences so that they can really benefit from just all the expertise that's out there.
Yeah, something we're very focused on in the industry as well. And we are enormously grateful for the work that you do and your service to our government, protecting us, keeping us safe, keeping our warfighters safe, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about the technology roadmap forward and everything that we can expect and what you're expecting from us to help with the mission. So Morgan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yep, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Morgan Adamski. We go this way.
Yeah, we're off this way.
Please welcome Sam Sabin, cybersecurity reporter at Axios, with Omar Santos, distinguished engineer at Cisco, and Kristen Verderame, Vice President, Global Government Relations at NetApp.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And thank you to Omar and Kristen for gabbing with me for the next 20 or so minutes. We have been charged with talking about a very lofty topic, and we're going to really cover a lot of points, hopefully, maybe, not to put too much pressure on you guys, in that time, which is AI security. So to start, I would love to maybe dive into the potential benefits of seeing AI applied to the federal government. What can be done now that maybe we couldn't do before, or maybe what can happen? I know a lot of this is still in development, all that fun stuff, and kick off to you, Omar, first.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very exciting time. What we're seeing nowadays, every single AI conference or discussion, you hear the term that 2025 is a year of agents. That now you're starting to actually see the power of AI rather than creating a poem in ChatGPT. And it is true. It is true. I'm seeing it firsthand.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that we're transitioning from, especially in cybersecurity, from using AI to react and remediate to predict and detect.
Yep.
That's one of the main powers of the technology. And to give you examples of that, right now we have technologies that we are introducing to the market that are using AI to revolutionize the way that we're actually going to be modernizing infrastructure.
Yep.
Right? An example of that is something that we call hypershield, and where we're actually using AI models to actually test network infrastructure before patches are actually in the market, right? So it's transformational for us. The other one is the power of massively going through large data sets and that go beyond the traditional cybersecurity operation center, right? How can you then have areas that you may never think about cybersecurity,
Yep.
to then have some cybersecurity implications, in other words, how to do remediation at a large scale and detect things that are potentially even being driven with AI, attacks that are being driven with AI. The other area that I'm seeing a lot of, that I'm super enthusiastic about, is education.
Yeah.
We were just talking earlier about the workforce, and in cybersecurity, unfortunately, that's a huge problem nowadays. So now with AI, you see every single CISO trying to see how can my tier 1 security operations center automatically becomes a tier 2,
Yep.
right? How can I do more with less? And specifically at Cisco, we take pride of the Network Academy. Network Academy, for those of you that don't know, have assisted for more than 25 years. Very close to my heart. We have trained many, many, many people. We have a really amazing program in cybersecurity, and what you're seeing now is the integration of cybersecurity and AI in the learning, and not only learning, but the capabilities of the workforce as well.
Totally. Kristen?
I would say what we see is making the traditional cybersecurity weapons and tools that we've had even better. So we're a data company, all things data security, data management, data storage. And so as we're responsible for holding a lot of this nation's data, we obviously have to secure it. So we've built things over the years, anomaly tracking, face recognition, whatever you're doing, tools you're using to protect your data. AI has allowed us to do it a lot quicker and a lot better, a lot stronger. So in fact, we have 100% ransomware guarantee. If we hold your data, we guarantee you're going to get it back in pretty much the same form that it was taken. And the only reason we're allowed to do that, or able to do that, is because we've incorporated AI into our technology. It helps us do it a lot quicker. It also enables us to do proactive threat hunting. We can actually look a lot more broadly to see what's coming in and stop it before it even gets in, which goes to that guarantee as well. So it's taking the tools we've all been using for a long time and just putting them on steroids, making them a lot faster and a lot better.
Yeah, totally. And of course, I can't ask about the benefits without also asking about the risk. There are probably many of us in this room, myself included, who are in conversations where either people don't think the risk is overblown or are coming to me with alarm bells ringing, screaming, oh my God, the catastrophe is coming, beware, the robots are gonna get us, who knows? It could happen, I don't know. So I gotta ask, just to help us ground this conversation, what are the inherent risks that, I don't wanna say that matter, because all risk, maybe matters, but that are super significant that you all are thinking about and want this audience to be thinking about as they're kind of working on policies, regulations, talking with those people who write that as well. And, yeah.
So I think the biggest risk that I see in the policy work we do here in Washington is having policymakers actually understand the technology.
Yep.
So I chair the IT Sector Coordinating Council at CISA, representing 150 tech companies across the entire ecosystem, including OT, IT and OT. It's a pretty comprehensive group. And our job is to advise CISA on policies and guide them in a way to find that win-win, kind of what Morgan was talking about, right? What can industry do really well and bring into the fold that government can then take and run with, right? It's a win-win for both of us. And when I look at what we're able to do with them and the tools we're able to use, it's really been a job of educating them as to what AI is. A lot of people think AI is software. Or they think it's NVIDIA chips, compute. But it's actually an AI system. And so one of the projects we've run with CISA is looking at what's in that system. You've got the data, which is our stuff. You've got the networking, which is this guy's stuff. You've got the compute, NVIDIA. You've got the APIs that connect it. You've got the edge, where a lot of times you put the compute. Lots of pieces, and they all have to be locked down. So if government and policymakers don't understand the big picture of how it actually all works, and for example, CISA focusing only on software in their last effort, that's a risk to me. They're not actually locking down the whole system, and it all needs to be locked down.
Yeah.
You're spot on whenever it comes to this system. I am honored to co-chair the Coalition for Secure AI with Anthropic, OpenAI, NVIDIA, Google, a whole bunch of different companies, and we're talking about how can we educate the rest of the world that cybersecurity applies not only just to the model. We have to think about outside the model, right? We have to think about the infrastructure, the aging of the infrastructure. We have to think about your vector databases that now are providing data to your environment. You're basically converting your data now into numbers so the AI can actually do something with it. Most of those, they don't even support encryption, right? So a lot of the questions that we're asking nowadays should have been asked 10 years ago. The other element is, I'm also very proud to be at Cisco for 25 years. So I saw how Cisco grew and the internet grew. So in case I'm dating myself. Mm-hmm. Now we have an opportunity that is like never before, because we have to rethink about how these entities, what we call agents, are going to communicate with each other. Whenever we help grow the internet, we have robust protocols that we still use nowadays. And what is happening now is that because of the ease of creating technology, a lot of people are skipping cybersecurity best practices that we assisted for many, many years. So it's really easy for you to do a quick experimentation, put it into production, and now you skip all the cybersecurity elements. So that education is extremely important. Mm. And then, of course, the age of infrastructure, which is something that is a big challenge in the industry right now.
Totally, totally. And Kristen, you maybe preempted my next question, which is amazing. It's almost like we did a prep call. But I'm wondering, you brought up your work with the IT Sector Coordinating Council and the work at CISA, and maybe if I'm reading between the lines right, the problem of only viewing AI as just the software and securing the model. Can you talk a bit more about how, especially as CISA is getting new leadership, they're kind of doing a review of how they're doing various programs, how you kind of want to see the agency potentially expand its thinking and its approach to AI security?
Well, it's clear from speaking with our acting executive assistant director, Karen Evans, that their focus is on really complying with what the statute is telling them to do, and that only, and that's fine. I think that makes good sense. So a lot of the projects that we had been working with them on are maybe in that circle and maybe out. We're trying to figure out what still survives and what doesn't for what we've been doing for a long time. I think the goal is still the same. How do we actively secure AI for the homeland, right? For the areas in which Homeland Security is statutorily required to protect. We're trying to figure that out. I think the key, always, again, is working with industry to figure out what are we seeing, what's the technology that's out there that we can do. A lot of government goals, and we saw this with the Supply Chain Task Force over the last several years. The government would say, hey, we want to do these things. And we'd say, well, that's great, but we can't actually do those things from a technological standpoint, or our business case won't get us there, or whatever. Bringing people together to figure out what is that win-win, what can we all do together, I think is the key. The Secure by Design framework that Director Easterly came out with a few years ago, industry fully supported, and the ITSCC spent a lot of time helping them put meat on the bones of that skeleton program, whether it was different variations of the guidelines that were put out or the pledge that we helped wordsmith a year ago so we could all sign up. I think over 300 countries now have signed, or companies have now signed the Secure by Design pledge. And then we have technical workshops to say, okay, what is working within that framework? What are companies learning from that process? The big companies sharing with the smaller companies, learning from each other. I think it's been a very successful program, and I don't think they're going to discontinue that in terms of the goal. Okay. The question is the how the new administration is going to look at going after that.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that because I feel like there, and I'm guilty of contributing to this, a lot of concern or confusion around how engagement with CISA is going, especially, post the end of CPAC and other, agency changes, staff leaving and coming back, and the seemingly chaotic nature of the agency at this moment. That might not be fair, but CISA can tell me that later. But I'm curious how engagement is going, how frequently you're kind of chatting with them about this stuff, yeah.
Well, the executive committee of the ITSCC, we sit down with the executive assistant director every month in person, and we've done that for a long time, and we see that continuing with the new Trump administration. I think we all see the benefits of bringing kind of what we see our priorities areas for the agency and what they see as priority areas together. I don't see that changing. Certainly with the CPAC umbrella gone, it's a big concern. We're not allowed to provide really that substantive guidance that we had been providing, at least not to the level we were, but we're certainly allowed to information share. So all of our conversations now are, we're sharing information.
Yeah.
We'll certainly continue to do that.
Yeah.
They absolutely see the benefits of continuing to do that. I think everyone is trying to work together to figure out what does the new umbrella look like. Yep. So that we can continue a lot of the missions, enduring security framework, supply chain task force, some of those big projects we've been doing together, how we can get those to continue. So I'm encouraged by what we've heard from the new administration. I think we got to wait for the deck chairs to keep shuffling around and settle down. But I think the goal is still the same, and there's still a definite interest in working with industry, which makes me happy.
Perfect. And this is a question for both of you, but I'll start with you, Omar, which is, looking ahead and maybe switching gears to chatting about the AI action plan over at the White House. I'm wondering what both of your companies submitted comments. I'm curious what the priorities are, what you want to kind of see come out of that action plan, and things of that nature. Yeah.
We definitely need to invest, not only government, across the world, to invest in technology, because we're facing. We just put a report out from Talos. Talos is our security research arm, and the common denominator of most attacks that we investigated last year was around aging infrastructure and stolen credentials, credential management, and so on. We really, really need to invest in the aging infrastructure, but at the same time thinking about what are the capabilities that we have to have in place for, again, credential management and the two fundamental areas of cybersecurity, which is visibility and control, right? And now if you put that, the AI wave coming to us, how we're actually going to be securing and monitoring things that we don't even have protocols sufficient enough to say, hey, how these agents are going to be communicating with. So Cisco is making some significant investments on creating those protocols. One that we just released is called Agency. The other one is through the Coalition for Secure AI. We're actually providing guidance into, yes, it's actually amazing that you can take advantage of the power, but how are you going to validate these models? Perfect example of that, even at Cisco, where I sit, is in the security and trust organization. So basically, we are tasked to protect Cisco and protect customers. So all the incident response teams, product security, offensive security, sit under my organization. I was tasked to say, okay, how are we going to secure AI implementations, right? And long story short, we acquired a company called Robust Intelligence. We have a product called AI Defense. However, the core elements of that technology is around validation. Right now, what is happening is that even with traditional technologies, it's very subjective, the validation of a security in an environment, but specifically in an AI model or an AI system, that's getting a little bit more complicated. And the second one is the visibility and control. Right? That is something that we have to really invest, not only in the capabilities of the technology, but also in our people as well.
Totally. Totally.
I would agree with everything you said, of course. What I would add is I think one of the key tenets is to make sure whatever we do going forward is risk-based as a starting point. I think we've done that well in terms of our cybersecurity policy over the long term. The cybersecurity framework is, of course, risk-based. NIST's work on AI, the risk management framework, it's all risk-based. I think that's key. Really looking at what are the actual risks and responding to those, not just the what-ifs and the maybes, right? And that's where industry can really help identify those items. I would also foot stomp comments that we've made to EAD, Karen Evans in our first meeting, the importance of policymakers to work with their colleagues and counterparts around the world. The work that Director Easterly did with Secure by Design with a lot of other cybersecurity agencies in Australia and the UK and Japan, terrific opportunity for us as global companies to go and meet with them and share resources, share information. I meet with government regulators in cyber around the world regularly, and it is hugely helpful to be kind of at least having that same baseline, that same framework from which to start those conversations. So in any kind of policy for the Trump administration to look forward to, I really would encourage them, as we did with EAD Evans, to really continue that international outreach that has been so useful. Cyber's not a local thing. It's not a national thing. It's a global thing, especially for us global companies. So the more they can collaborate with their international counterparts, the better.
Totally. I feel like I have 1,000 more questions. Based on this alone, I have a clock that is glaring at me, telling me I probably have one question left that I can ask you guys, which is, with all of this in mind, we have covered a lot of ground. There's more ground to be covered. But as this administration continues to ramp up and is getting the right personnel in place and leadership agencies, I'm wondering what is maybe the one thing that your companies desperately need them to get right when it comes to AI security? And I'm going to add to this question, what is the first step to getting there? And I'll leave it to either of you.
I think I can start. The balance of innovation and security is a very complex one.
Yeah.
And especially whenever you think about something as big as the federal government, hundreds of thousands of systems.
Yep.
It's not a matter of probably more than hundreds of thousands of systems, right? But now, if you want to take advantage of the power of AI, you have to really have that balance in place, but invest. And it's really hard. We had a conversation in the morning. It's really hard to say invest to save money.
Yep.
But we really have to think about, what is going to be the requirements of the infrastructure of not the future is that we need today in order to advance these technologies.
Totally.
I agree, and again, following from this morning's conversation, and whether you're looking for efficiencies or not, the government agencies still have to fulfill their mission. They still have to complete what they're being told by government, by Congress, by our citizens to go do. So it's not as simple as just cutting. It's figuring out, again, understanding the technology. I think that's the very first step, and the thing I would insist on the most. Really understand what you're looking at, whether it's how procurement works to get technology, whether it's what to do to encourage innovation, so the private sector continues to innovate and invest, and then include those who do understand it in your conversations. And really, and I know I sound like a one-trick pony here, but finding that win-win with industry and government, because we actually are all on the same page. We do want to sell our products, but I think those of us who work and serve the federal government, it's the mission that drives us. We want the government to be successful. We want, as citizens, our digital services to work. We want our country to be protected, more so than we want to sell stuff, honestly. At least I won't tell my head of sales that, but those of us who work in this space, that's what we care about. So finding that win-win is actually possible. We've demonstrated it, and I hope that we can continue to do that.
Totally, and I'm going to cheat and ask, for a few years I keep hearing we need to educate, right? Where are we in that process? Are you feeling like there are offices that really get it? You don't have to name names, but that really get it? Like, where are we in DC in terms of just educating on this issue?
I think we've come a long way.
Okay.
Certainly the folks at CISA have been wonderful to lean forward into industry to learn, and that's been very helpful. I think part of the reason they focused on software is not because they don't understand that there's more there. They only have so many resources and time and ability to do things within the tight deadlines they had. So I'm not throwing CISA under the bus for focusing on just software, but it's really working in that collaborative environment to really educate each other. There are things that government knows from behind closed doors that we don't know. So again, working together to educate each other, I think is critical in that process.
Perfect.
One of the perfect examples, and I know that we were out of time, is our collaboration. You mentioned CISA in the education of even incident response playbooks. We just recently finished a collaborative effort between a lot of different agencies, CISA and the private sector, which we're very proud of. And how can we not only educate the masses, but the incident responses that the cybersecurity experts, quote unquote experts, that exist nowadays for the threats of the future. And there's a significant amount of investment and capabilities that are being now created as far as education from that respect.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, before someone rushes us off the stage, I'm gonna end this here. Omar, Kristen, thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys.
Joining us now is Gordon Bitko, Executive Vice President, Public Sector at ITI, with Amar Paul, President and CEO of North America Operations at Schneider Electric.
Everybody, and Amir, good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I thought I'd start this conversation, and not that I'm going to hold it against the prior panel for going over, but we're going to try to quickly jump into the topic. Chairman Guthrie this morning spent a lot of time talking about the importance of energy to solving the AI problem and to making the U.S. competitive. That's right in Schneider's sweet spot. I know not a lot of people probably know as much about what Schneider does, but you guys are really innovation drivers in that space. And so I thought I'd start just by asking you, how are you thinking right now about innovation in this AI and energy space?
Wow, that's a big question. Schneider has been part of the electrification of the U.S. infrastructure for 135 years. It is literally our last name. And one of the things that we see is that this is an opportunity to think about this as a systems problem. We're super excited about all the distinct conversations that are happening. How do you get microgrids in place and use natural gas to create behind-the-meter resources? Super important conversation. How do you get distributed energy assets deployed at much larger scales? Super important. And we believe in this all-of-the-above mindset. But all of those, when they're done in isolation, miss the point. This is the largest single integrated system we've ever built, which is our grid infrastructure. And we have to attack it as that, a systems problem. I'll give you one small point in terms of how we think about this. So we have three things happening right now. We have load growth that we haven't seen before, at a pace we haven't seen before. And yes, of course, AI is a big part of that, and Goldman Sachs and everybody's got different models of what percentage of the electricity in the country is going to be used by data centers. The point is, it's going up faster than we've recognized in a long time, and we are at the very early stages of that AI deployment. Okay, message number one. But message number two, at whatever pace it happens through either policy tailwinds or headwinds, through market forces, we're also electrifying everything. We're electrifying factories, homes, cars, transport infrastructure, ports, airports. And so that load growth is also going to happen. And when you combine the two, we have to think about this infrastructure differently. The current grid is 70 years old. Most of it is approaching the end of its useful life. And I'll pause after this last point. It was designed as a single directional system. You generate, you distribute, transmit, consume, right? That is no longer going to work. You're not going to have it as a single directional system. All these distributed energy assets have to be part of nodes that are also pushing energy back into the transmission system. And so this idea of the grid becoming bidirectional allows us to solve for peaks in an entirely different way. And those are some of the big themes we're working on.
Yeah, so let's dive, Amir, into that grid modernization point a little bit more. And I want to tie that back again to something that Chairman Guthrie was talking about around sending signals for private investment. I think he was thinking about it on the energy generation side. We need an all-of-the-above solution, which absolutely true. But we need that on the grid side too, right? For the reasons that you just mentioned. We all know the grid is strained. If you're here from Texas, which I think a few people are, you've lived through storms knocking your grid out. We need that sort of all-of-the-above investment in the grid side too. And I know, again, that's a place where Schneider's doing a lot of work and has put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, look, we last week we announced a $700 million investment in the U.S., largest in our 135-year history, precisely because we are so excited about the opportunities, but we also think we need to move at speed. If you think about the grid architecture, one of the things that you have to always come back to is we need to make sure we're utilizing it at the maximum point at all points in time. Today, the grid utilization is highly flexible. And I'm going to give you an analogy which is technically incorrect, and I have very, very bright engineers that work at Schneider that remind me this is technically incorrect. But for most of us, it's a useful mental model. So go with me for a minute. When cloud computing came out, AWS, or at the time just Amazon, had a lot of underutilized capacity. They had built all this incredible infrastructure, but they had 5, 6, maybe 20 days where they were hitting the peaks. And the rest of the time, the infrastructure was sitting around. And so they decided, look, there's a way that we can, with the right services, the right software, the right management layer, sell this capacity. And that was the birth of cloud computing. And if you ever have an opportunity to meet Andy Jassy, he will give you sort of the much more exciting version, blow by blow, how that played out. But that's the essence of the story. It was about taking a fixed infrastructure with lots of underutilization and thinking about it differently. I think about the grid the same way. Of course, we need to make it more weather resilient. Of course, we need to make sure it becomes bidirectional, but we really have to figure out a way to find more points where it's well utilized throughout the day. If you look at the duck curve in California, that is the problem we're trying to solve. And how do we do that in a systemic way across the system? The last point I'll make is the most important thing we can do today, not 5 years from now, not with a bunch of supply chain investments or breakthrough technologies like small-scale nuclear. What we can do today is demand-side efficiency. If you just deployed the technologies available from the industry, all of us, right? Today, we could reduce demand-side consumption by 30 to 35%. That's a massive amount of capital that we avoid investing. Capital that, by the way, if we don't do it that way, will make its way through the rate structure and ultimately to the average American. So demand-side efficiency programs coupled with software that allows better grid utilization are two of the big elements.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and a couple of different ways that I want to dive into. The first one is those problems that you're talking about. AI itself is a tool to help solve some of them, right? So how do we start to think about coupling AI as a solution? But then the other thing that we need to think about as we're looking at AI as part of the solution is what are the workforce implications for this? How do we ensure that people who for years, decades have built the grid in a certain way, who understand how it operates in a certain way, know the new technologies, know the new capabilities? How do we ensure there's the right public-private partnerships to drive that kind of change?
That's such an important question. Let me start with the second part of that, and I'll come back to the first part. Most of you don't get the privilege and opportunity to do this, but if you do find yourself in a utility or water municipality, especially if it's not in a terribly large city, ask to meet the lead engineer or the team of sort of specialists. When things go wrong, who do you call, right? And you will meet incredibly dedicated, capable people that have been working in that facility, in that domain for 20 to 30 years, and are generally less than 5 years from retirement. And so there's this incredible transfer of knowledge that has to happen, but for that to happen, we also have to digitize this infrastructure because the next generation coming in just doesn't know how to operate the environment if we don't have that digital layer. So there's an element of investing, and part of the reason a few years ago we had the privilege of investing in OSI Pi, which is the data historian system, part of Aviva, which makes Schneider the world's 5th largest industrial software company, is primarily because of this. We need to invest in this software and digital transformation of utilities. Last week at Distributech, we also announced a big investment in this space with our digital grid solution stack. The second part of this is labor. So in the US, you have about 10,000 electricians in all forms retiring on an annual basis and about 7,000 joining the workforce. That's a 3,000 electrician deficit every year. At the current rate, that will become the primary barrier to our capital investments. So we have to find more ways to use that labor more efficiently and frankly invest dramatically to bring more people into the trades. Now your first question was, how is AI actually helping all of this? And I think real-time optimization, load balancing, I think this idea of getting distributed assets connected to the grid and managing them is a key element. But there's also much more sort of practical use cases that we can deploy today. We invested in a company called AI Dash, which is using imaging tools to monitor vegetation growth and weather events to predict places where you could have fires that would then interfere with grid operations. So I think there's this circular element of the better technologies we make, the more data infrastructure we have, the more we can use AI to help us be more efficient. But that sort of virtuous cycle kicks in probably 3 to 5 years from now, and in the short term, there's a lot of infrastructure we still have to build.
So I guess since this is inherently a policy audience, from a policy imperative perspective, what are the things that we need to do in the next 3 to 5 years that get us to that point where we're in that future state that the AI is a virtuous cycle?
Apparently, there's some sort of announcement this evening about trade policy. I was told by my team not to talk about it, so I'm not going to talk about it. I have been thinking about it, and a lot of my colleagues have as well. Look, if our goal is, and I think Chairman Guthrie said this, and we had the privilege of meeting with him yesterday, actually, be first, win, right? Win the AI race, build more infrastructure, build it better, build it faster, make it more available, win. That's a speed of deployment conversation. Second, make the grid resilient, make it safe, and make sure that energy inflation is not something Americans have to worry about, right? We see what this does to economies by just looking at what happened to Europe after the Ukraine war started. And it is devastating. It's devastating to consumers, it's devastating to industrial investment. So make sure grid resilience, grid availability, and to use the vocabulary, energy dominance is a priority. If you just say that's my 1 and 2, then your simple job as a policymaker is to remove all elements of friction that get in the way of delivering the mission. And of course, that'll come with trade-offs. And of course, there are priorities to make. And the reason we're investing at the scale we're investing with the prior investment this decade will be $1 billion of capital we're deploying, not to mention the M&A we've done. And frankly, all our peer companies are doing the same, is because we see that opportunity. And frankly, we see the opportunity to deliver that mission for the country. But you can't have competing priorities. So if number 1 is speed, number 2 is resilience and cost effectiveness, make that 1 and 2 and then put all the support behind it and drive as fast as you can. I'm a big fan of Churchill, and he had this great line. He said, you can always count on Americans to do the right thing once they've exhausted all other options. Right. So I think on this, if we want to do the right thing, let's make sure that we put all our energy, no pun intended, behind that.
So going back to your comment before, your team also wanted me to make sure that we don't get into any of those other discussions, so strike any of those comments from the record. There's no press conference this afternoon that we know about. But in all seriousness, the chairman did talk about we need to think about this as an all of the above solution, right? We need to find lots of different ways to tackle this problem. And I know that means for Schneider, not just what are the sources of energy, but how do you think about driving efficiency in the data center and in chip design and in grid design? I know that there's a lot of work going on in that space as well.
We just partnered with NVIDIA, and we have a digital simulation design tool called ETAP. And with that, we created a digital twin that people can sit down and say, okay, if I am going to have this mix of training versus this mix of inference in my data center, what should be my architecture and how can I optimize that? If my energy sources are going to change, what can I do? And by the way, I really, coming back to my earlier point about the grid being bidirectional, don't think of data centers as just consumers of energy. Data centers can be grid stabilizers. Deployed the right way with the right policy conditions, with the right time of impact notifications, not hours, but days. Data centers can actually help stabilize grid performance. So how do we design them more effectively? How do we run them more effectively, which includes things like liquid cooling and combinations of liquid and air cooling? How do we make sure we think differently about what load form factor we have between training, inference, and cloud? And then how do we make sure that that building itself is part of a stable network within the grid? One of the things, back to the all of the above strategy, is we're building LNG power plants behind the meter, because there are markets where time to power with the interconnect queue could be 7 years, and we're able to deliver 300 megawatts of power using an LNG power plant in 2.5 years. So that's a massive difference. And then you can start thinking about things like sequestration to make sure that that's also efficient. Last comment, and I know we're on the clock, this idea that all of the above means we're not going to invest in the new energy landscape, in direct current, in storage, in solar, I think is a bankrupt idea. No transition in the history of technology, any technology, has ever been successful, and no country has ever won by focusing on solely legacy technology. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't take advantage of the incredible assets we have. I was at CERAWeek, and we heard the new energy secretary speak, Chris Wright, about unleashing the assets we have in natural gas and oil and gas, and we completely agree. That is energy that we have at low cost, that's abundant, that we can utilize, and it's a competitive advantage. But that should not be in conflict with investing in research and development for the next generation. Every time we've made progress, it's come out of being able to do both, being great today and investing in building a future tomorrow and being competitive in that future. And let's not be confused, on that front, we're behind. So we have to play catch up. And so how do we get that balance right is what we're all trying to work through, but it has to be both that we're investing in.
Yeah, so many more questions out of that, but I know the clock has hit 0, so we're about to turn into pumpkins. So Amir, thank you so much.
There you go. And we didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Returning to the stage is Jason Oxman, President and CEO of ITI, joined by FCC Commissioner Nathan Simington.
Commissioner, welcome.
Delighted to be here.
Well, we are delighted to have you. Thanks for taking the time to come over. I know it's a busy time at the Commission, and just thrilled to have you here and talking about tech policy with us.
It's a huge privilege to address this distinguished crowd. I'm really glad to be here and have the chance to talk through a few things with you.
They are distinguished. You can't see them through the bright lights, but they are distinguished, and I was told by Chairman Guthrie this morning they are also beautiful. So that remains true, no question about it. Congratulations on being in the majority. Hopefully you'll have a third commissioner join you within the next few weeks. An ambitious agenda under the Trump administration. A lot that I want to talk about. Love to get through, we'll talk about the cybersecurity issues, including the cyber trust mark. We'd love to have some time to talk about spectrum policy and other things that are on your mind. And as always, your practice advice to the tech industry about how we can be helpful to your work is valuable. But let's start with the cyber trust mark. It's something that you've been very focused on, something that ITI and the tech industry have supported. Can you give us an update on where the cyber trust mark work stands at the Commission right now, and what you're looking for from industry to make this successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very exciting to me that we came up with a program that's voluntary and that is not prescriptive. So when we were coming up with the program design, we looked at other cybersecurity certifications, including, for example, the EU program. And our conclusion was that it's very difficult for the government to define what the boxes are that should be ticked. I mean, we can have some ideas of what might constitute an acceptable baseline from which to start, but it's not possible for the government to either anticipate or to rapidly respond to a changing cybersecurity environment. Almost all of the necessary knowledge resides within private industry or within specialized IC and NatSec arms of the government. So just as important, though, we wanted something that wouldn't merely be a drag sail on industry, but that would instead unlock differentiation and competition, thus I'm sure many of the folks here today have had frustrating experiences with finding cybersecurity insurance. And cyber insurance in general is just a field where it's difficult to have adequate claims history and price discovery. And so as a result, the market isn't that mobile, and many parties feel that they're either paying too much or have to self-insure. So so we were trying to look at how a cyber trust mark would play into all aspects of this and create differentiation, as well as engaging the insurance industry in developing a more mature cyber insurance market. The conclusion that we came up with is that voluntary representations and voluntary participation are really the name of the game. There's a frequent analogy to Energy Star, and I think that analogy is on point. But I think it's just as significant that in December we designated Underwriters Labs as the lead program administrator. And the analogy that I like to use, just as you can't go to a restaurant to save 5 cents on your meal with a non-UL oven because their insurance carrier will drop them, it's going to be the same in the cybersecurity world, where once we've defined what constitutes meaningful cybersecurity through a process of market discovery, that's I suppose mediated but not controlled by the government, then at that point you start to have meaningful competition and differentiation in cybersecurity, as well as discovery of what the appropriate level of protection is to every product category. Frankly, the government probably could design a bulletproof cybersecurity regime, but the problem is that would be like driving around town in an armored tank wearing a crash helmet. There's a reason we don't make those choices in our lives, right? We've at some point made a risk payoff decision, and I think it's probably true that we'll never see an RC car market that's heavily differentiated in terms of cybersecurity. And if there is, we have a flexible mechanism to respond to that. So that's sort of the high-level view. As far as actual timelines and implementation, as far as I know, the operative provisions of Biden Executive Order 14144 are still in effect, requiring U.S. government procurement of cyber trust mark equipment by January 2027. Now, what's interesting there is that I don't know how you implement that, because currently the cyber trust mark only applies to consumer devices that are IoT. And I don't know how much of that the United States government actually procures. I mean, I'm sure there's some number of, of smart fridges and whatnot that we buy, but it's probably not a major purchase and procurement category. So I think the really interesting question for this year is, number one, will that provision stay in? Will that date stay in? This was a January 18th Biden EO, so rather late in the administration. And if it does stay in, will it wind up being extended to either pure wireless networking equipment, not just IoT, and or to industrial and public safety equipment in addition to consumer? I think those are both really interesting questions, and those are going to be major factors, of course, for everyone's R&D, sales and distribution cycles. So it's going to be important to stay closely engaged on this front. My own personal view is that we're likely to see extensions of the category of equipment that is able to receive a cyber trust mark. I'm not sure if we would go for wireless first, or for industrial first, or for both. But in that case, there's already an existing framework for the United States government to leverage to address some of its cybersecurity concerns in that area. So if that's the case, then hopefully we'll still have, let's say, 15 to 18 months to run the first 1 or 2 product cycles prior to the procurement requirement coming in.
Makes good sense.
Yeah, obviously that's going to move the market.
Yeah. Makes good sense, and we certainly as an industry appreciate your focus on this because it does highlight the need to secure government networks, obviously. And consumers, the Energy Star situation, maybe they're looking at the power usage of an appliance when they buy it. They're probably not thinking about cybersecurity when they buy devices, but those are entry points into networks that we have to be concerned about as well.
And people don't think about cybersecurity in part because there's a lot of learned helplessness around the issue. People don't really believe that they can buy a cybersecurity differentiated product in a way that's legible to them. To the extent that they do, there's a halo effect around the brand. I mean, for example, there's a perception that Apple products have a high degree of cybersecurity, and that's probably part of why people are willing to pay the Apple tax. And we can imagine that by surfacing this and making it explicit and allowing vendors to make representations to the public that the public really feels can be vindicated, that this becomes a potential domain of competition.
Yep, makes sense. Staying on the subject of cybersecurity, I'm going to turn you into the cybersecurity commissioner by the end of this chat, if that's okay. Staying on that subject, the FCC has had as its mission since the Communications Act of 1934, or even the Radio Act before that, a decade before that, securing networks. And it was a lot easier in the world where those networks were owned by one company. When I worked at the Commission in the 1990s, I worked in the Common Carrier Bureau because it was still called the Common Carrier Bureau because there wasn't anybody else except the Common Carrier. And that was fine, and that made it easy to secure networks. Now it's obviously a lot harder. There are a lot more points of vulnerability, a lot more operators. Can you share your view of the role of the Commission in helping ensure the security of our nation's cyber infrastructure, which of course includes a lot of core network components that are under the FCC's jurisdiction?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, again, an area where the public has a reasonable expectation that the government is going to take effective action to secure their rights, their privacy, and their security. I would say you're completely right in highlighting both the difficulties of doing so in an arbitrarily large number of vendor environment as opposed to two, when you have AT&T and Western Electric. You'll remember back in the day, we were supposed to not use anything other than Western Electric CPE. I mean, that was at the basis of many commission decisions in the 50s, 60s, 70s. The argument at the time was that it might physically damage the network. Well, that cat's out of the bag.
The Hushaphone case, which brought that to an end.
Right.
If we talked about Hushaphone, the entire audience would leave.
Yeah.
But I just want to note for the record that I actually have a Hushaphone.
Oh, you do?
At home. I'll bring it next time we have
it,
a chance to chat.
Yeah. So you were supposed to only use supplied equipment from the vendor, and indeed the whole network was in many ways physically unhackable. If you have an electromechanical relay network, then I don't know how you hack that other than breaking into the AT&T skyscraper in Manhattan, with a lot of wire, and I don't even know how you do it. Of course, the system was so secure that people didn't bother distinguishing the control plane from the communications plane, so that's how the phone freaks are able to whistle free phone calls to each other. But eventually that got tied up too, and then you had a network that was truly secured in every meaningful sense. Moving forward to today, I guess what I would say is the FCC probably will never have the specialized knowledge to be a policy originator of first impression in this area. Because the FCC is never going to be a specialized cybersecurity agency. The FCC started grappling with this seriously under the Wheeler administration. And of course, the difficulty is that the FCC is structurally limited in its size because we're a regulatory fee-funded agency rather than appropriations funded, which is certainly not an unhappy funding situation to be in right now compared to the rest of DC. But nonetheless, it caps the size of the agency at about 1,600 people. And even if we took every person and committed them to cybersecurity, it still would not be enough to be genuinely responsive to state-level actor attacks, which is now the question that we have to cope with. Now, there's a lot of good connective tissue inside the government between the IC NatSec world and the FCC that's been built out over the last few years. For example, we've responded effectively to problems with Border Gateway Protocol. Some of you may remember that was at the root of the Rogers takedown in Canada, although that wasn't a cyber attack, that was a misconfiguration issue. But it was very scary for me as a Canadian to see a national network go out in one day. It took down the debit card system over the entire country. It took out 911 in many communities. So we responded to that effectively at the FCC in connection with the security folks and the network operations specialists. I think that's really the model going forward to responding to the potential for state-level actor or non-state actor attacks on American communications networks, which at this point are just basic dependencies for almost every aspect of life. And if the FCC tries to reinvent the wheel on these topics, as opposed to implementing recommendations that primarily originate outside the FCC, then I think that's probably the wrong way to run things. Fortunately, I think Chairman Carr, by establishing his National Security Communications Council within the agency, has built out an effective inside the building response team that's capable of absorbing and ingesting the information coming from outside the FCC, whether that's from industry or from the rest of the government, and then turning that into a regulatory framework that could actually be meaningfully operationalized by a carrier. So, but that's, I think, the state of play right now. That's how the FCC has got to govern itself and think about the issue going forward.
Great. And we look forward to informing your work in this important area. Let's talk about spectrum, and then I'm hoping we have time to talk about space. So spectrum first. A lot of discussion on Capitol Hill, maybe not quite enough, about moving Spectrum Auction Authority forward to restore the Commission's key role there. Just wanted to hear your thoughts kind of at a higher level about the Commission's spectrum agenda, both as to licensed spectrum and unlicensed, both of which are key priorities of the tech industry. What can we expect to see this year going forward?
Well, I think it's very significant that Chairman Carr opened his first meeting with a spectrum commercialization item. Of course, he had also prior served as commissioner in the PI Commission, and the PI Commission was probably the most active spectrum commercializing commission that we'd ever seen. So much so that much of the PI agenda remained to be fully implemented during the Biden administration. So there was even apart from what was directly commercialized under PI, there was a large runoff for us to continue addressing for a number of years. The question of Spectrum Auction Authority is interesting because it shows that in the United States there are a number of entities that view themselves as having spectrum equities. And it's always difficult for us at the FCC to really surface the distinction between an equity that's to preserve a narrow interest and an equity that's to preserve an existential or at least engineering-driven interest that can't easily be substituted. It's difficult for the Commission to define what constitutes spectral efficiency because the criterion for efficiency is different in different services. If you're dealing with wireless microphones, for example, then having low latency, clear voice transmission on narrowband is just a different use case than from the cell phone industry, where increasingly it's about channel size and large data volumes, especially with supporting streaming video. So the difficulty of defining spectral efficiency and getting all the stakeholders to agree on what would constitute a commonly acceptable plan moving forward has been a chronic problem within the United States government. I think the hope here is in convening all of the relevant parties under the aegis of the Commerce Department this time. NTIA has sometimes been more of a recipient of policy than an originator of it in this area, just because NTIA is a small organization that doesn't carry a lot of weight compared to the Defense Department or the Department of Transportation. And so they were in the unenviable position, I think, of having responsibility without authority at some times in the past. I think the present NTIA is likely to feel itself much more empowered to push back on the federal sector, and that we'll be able to, therefore, clearly distinguish federal equities that are being protected for the sake of protection of equities versus federal equities that are really just indispensable capabilities that can't be replaced or can't economically be replaced. So when we talk about spectrum commercialization, I'm hoping we get to a real source of truth this time that's a consensus between FCC, NTIA, and NTIA stakeholders. I think that's the real path to move forward. You don't get anywhere in Washington, frankly, by just pitting your political weight against that of the Defense Department with its $870 billion budget, I believe it is. Yes. But on the other hand, this should not be primarily a political slugging match. This has to be a matter of surfacing the truth about different bands of spectrum to be commercialized. And then I think once we're able to get to a consensus framework, we can operate rapidly, and any objections to Spectrum Auction Authority would evaporate. So it's as much a matter of trust and credibility as it is the direct exercise of political power, but I think there's a real push towards establishing that mutual trust, credibility, and getting to consensus.
Yeah, that's great to hear. You know, it's been frustrating for us in the industry, as I'm sure it has been across government, to see certain agencies kind of reflexively dig in their heels and refuse to even permit an inquiry into the efficient use of spectrum under their dominion. And so it's good to hear your optimism that NTIA will be able to stand up, not only so my phone will work on runways of major airports, but also because there's a lot of spectrum out there that's being warehoused by government that could be put to a better use.
I think it's very difficult to be a federal user and to look at the TFA and say, you know, it's a one-way ratchet on the TFA. They commercialize it, but they never decommercialize it. And there is this sense that you have to protect your interests in case you might need them for a mission in the future. And again, distinguishing between cases like those where it's some sort of prudential planning where you don't take into account the cost to society of failure to commercialize, on the one hand, versus cases where you really cannot do without the necessary spectrum or where it would be debilitating economically and we would damage more than we would gain. Surfacing those distinctions is, I think, what the current process is going to be able to achieve and what was hard to do in the past. I guess maybe one more note on this. When we look at use cases for wireless mobility, obviously we've all seen our lives immensely enriched. No one wants to go back to 3G. We all really like 4G, and we're hopeful for 5G. I guess with that said, much of the actual money that has been made on 5G has been made in a place that wasn't really anticipated by just a naive reading of like 3GPP release 17. And I would characterize that as private networking in an industrial environment, or in any case, a non-consumer environment, such as for medical data. If you look at China, Chinese consumers have not shown much uptake of 5G. It's an upsell. Chinese consumers are generally happy with their LTE plans. But what's very interesting is that China has something like 100 times the private network densification in 5G that we've seen in the United States, indicating that the primary use cases where Chinese operators are making money in this area is in supplying the industrial sector, whether that's mines, factories, logistics, hospitals, ports. And getting to understand what that means for our competition situation, for our manufacturing situation, including defense manufacturing, is, I think, going to be part of the calculus as well. And that may also mean that people who don't have a large history of engagement with the wireless mobility sector are going to have to rapidly figure out what joint projects look like. There's also a little bit of a burning platform for the wireless mobility sector. 5G has been a very expensive transition, both in terms of licenses and in terms of equipment. And then realizing value on this transition remains stubbornly difficult, not just here, but in Europe and other jurisdictions. So I think there's a lot to be done on that front.
Yeah. Last quick question before we head over to lunch. Space, relatively new Space Enterprise Council. ITI has recently launched a Space Enterprise Council about a year ago, and then there's a Space Bureau at the FCC. So this is an enormously important issue for the tech sector as well. What can we expect to see on space policy out of the Commission this year?
I think the emphasis that you're going to see within the Commission specifically is an emphasis on greatly streamlining the licensing procedure, and just as important, removing opacity from it. At this point, I think it's difficult for any space company to have a sense of assurance about availability of launch telemetry spectrum. It's difficult for space companies to have assurance of operating spectrum, and with the United States as the world's foremost consumer of space services by a large margin, it's important for us to get this right and not have that be a drag cell. Frankly, at this point, the FCC and other U.S. government engagement process has been sufficiently difficult that we've seen U.S.-sourced companies domicile elsewhere just to get out from under our regulatory umbrella. And from what I hear about, for example, the ability of the German government to do rapid licensing of space operations, it's clear that there's a lot to learn and that we are not yet setting the standard worldwide, despite our enormously successful onshore industry. So that's obviously going to be very prominent. I think just as prominent will be the general concept of trying to get a one-stop shop. And what that looks like, I don't know. But trying to get a one-stop shop to interface with the United States government. Because we're built the way that we are because we grew our institutions up at a time when there were very few satellites, launches were rare, and international coordination was the primary consideration. That's why Space Bureau had to be spun out of the International Bureau at the FCC. But today, we're increasingly seeing space startups, which would have been just a strange thing to say 20 or 30 years ago. I was out in California and visited with a number of them in October, planning to visit with some more. And we're seeing greater engagement by the space sector in DC, sort of for the same reason, because they're realizing that a fantastic engineering-driven company may nonetheless founder on some regulatory obstacle that's totally invisible to it. So getting together some sort of a one-stop shop where we can consolidate the process of getting to space and create an interface that's usable to new space companies and incumbents alike would, I think, be a major point of progress, and that's something that we're internally working on. Whether that would sit within the FCC is, I think, less of a sure thing, but trying to figure that out is important.
Yeah, that makes good sense. I'm excited for the Project Kuiper launch that's coming up imminently, and looking forward to getting much more of our communications infrastructure coming from way out there. Commissioner Simington, this is a great conversation. Appreciate all the work that you're doing to move all these important technology issues forward, and appreciate your being with us here today. Please join me in thanking Commissioner Nathan Simington. Thank you. And please do join us for lunch right outside the doors. Barbara Humpton, the CEO of Siemens, will be there to make remarks along with Senator Amy Klobuchar. So we look forward to seeing you outside. Thanks.
Please welcome back to the stage Jason Oxman, President and CEO of ITI.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage to join me for a conversation about the mobile technology and other related AI issues, the President and CEO of Qualcomm. Please join me in welcoming Cristiano Amon. Cristiano, welcome.
Thank you.
It is an honor to have you here. It's great to have Qualcomm's participation in ITI. And this is a big year. You're celebrating 40th anniversary of Qualcomm. So happy anniversary. And I want to make sure not to sound too hyperbolic, but these devices that we carry around in our pockets, were it not for that 40-year history of Qualcomm, they would be heavy bricks that wouldn't have much functionality to them. Am I exaggerating when I say that Qualcomm is responsible for that ecosystem?
No, you're not. I think we're probably very proud and privileged to be, I think, the company that has the inventions that actually made the 3G, 4G, and 5G work. And it's one of those things that, especially when you look of the ability to have a computer that fits in the palm of your hand that is connected all the time, it did change the world. So I think that's why I've been, Qualcomm is a relatively young company, but this 40th anniversary is very special for us, looking back in history. Some of the things that our engineers had created is really amazing.
Yeah, and you're celebrating 40 years as a storied American company. And 40 years ago, of course, the broadband and wireless ecosystem that we all know of today wasn't fully developed. I remember when the iPhone was first unveiled in 2007. You've been quoted as saying, and I think this is a great comment, that if it wasn't for Qualcomm's chips, we'd all still be carrying around a really expensive iPod.
iPod Touch.
iPod Touch, that's true, an iPod Touch. Can you tell me a little bit about just the history of how Qualcomm got into that space and how it informs the innovations that you're putting out in the market and the mobile ecosystem today over that 40-year history?
Well, look, if you give me a few minutes, I'll just tell you a little bit of the history, how we end up doing different things. Because what is unique about Qualcomm, and I should basically say it before I answer, I'm very partial. I joined the company in 1995 as an engineer. I've been in the company for 30 years this year, and I love this company. But the interesting thing about Qualcomm is the company has been looking into problems that needed to be solved, and as a result, we create new technologies or we change in the process. So what really put us in the map was in the early days of cellular. You know, you had analog cellular. It looked like walkie-talkie. It was kind of, and that's really, it was a walkie-talkie at scale. And but the problem statement is, can we come up with a technology that deliver the same quality that you had on a landline to a cell phone and make sure that everybody on Earth could have a phone? That was the problem statement. Can we come up with a technology of a use of radio spectrum that everybody can have a phone? And that's how CDMA was born. And with that, Qualcomm became a mobile company with the technology that was revolutionized digital cellular. Then the next thing was, can we connect this? The internet was starting to get momentum in the world. It started at universities. All of a sudden, you know, you could do a dial-up on your PC, and the idea was, could we connect the phone to the internet? And that was the basis of 3G. Can we connect the phones to the internet? And you saw what happened. Phones started to get more capable, started to get emails. I think you all remember your BlackBerry, your Windows 3.1 phone, and your Palm, Trio, and then it was to a phone. And at the point in time, Qualcomm was like a wireless company, really focused on making sure that wireless communication happened. Then we came up with the idea of, can we create a problem, solve the problem? Could we bring broadband to a phone? And that was kind of the basis of 4G. But then we realized, if we're going to bring broadband to a phone, the phone needs to become a computer. So that was the beginning of Qualcomm going from a wireless communication company to developing computing technologies. And that was the beginning of Qualcomm computing technology. Most people don't know Qualcomm was the first company that have a CPU designed by us with 1 gigahertz clock speed on a battery-powered device that was the size of a phone. Because we knew we needed to create the fundamental technologies to make the phone into a computer, because that's where you're going to use the broadband, and that was the foundation of what's today the smartphone. Then we went, and that's kind of, we all had a 4G smartphones and all that. Then the next chapter of our company is after we work on 5G, and I think a lot, it will not be possible to have unlimited data rates if you don't have 5G. I think we all take it for granted now that we have unlimited data rates, but it will not be possible. And it's kind of incredible. You can get fiber-like speeds in a cell phone. But then what we realized at the time that mobile technology, there's so much scale there. If you think about it, the cell phone incorporated every single consumer electronics technology. The best camera in the world is the one that you carry with you all the time. That's the best music player. That's the best of everything. And now it's becoming a gaming device and et cetera. But what we realize is that scale could benefit so many other industries with computing, with connectivity. And we decided, can we go start changing other industries? And then the company start to change as we go tackle the next problem. The next problem we tackle, we realize that people are driving their cars and they buy an accessory called a phone holder and they put on the dashboard of the car to hold their phones. I said, well, that means the computing technology on the car is not up to stuff. It's not delivering to you what you wanted. That was the beginning of the Snapdragon Digital Cockpit, which now, a company like Qualcomm that wasn't a company known for being the automotive industry, now we serve every single automotive company in the world. All the Americans, all the Japanese, all the Koreans, all the Chinese, all the Europeans with the Snapdragon Digital Cockpit. And I think with that, the company changed. The company recently entered the PC space, because we realized that PC and phones are converging into one. And I think the fastest laptop you can buy right now, it's powered by Qualcomm Snapdragon X. Who would think that a company like Qualcomm that was known for mobile communications will build the fastest CPU in the world? Yeah. And next we're going to industrial. So it's interesting. I think the unique thing about the company is there's a problem, we go tackle that problem, and in the process, the company change and becomes a different company, and I think that's where we are, and I'm very proud of it.
It's a great evolution story, and it also highlights, for the tech policy advocates who are arrayed here, the ITI membership, who spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill and with the administration talking about these issues. It's a great reminder that the research and development work that's happening in American technology companies is crucial to our continued leadership in technology worldwide. And we talk about that in the tax context and advocating for investment tax credits. Can you share with us how your investment in research and development, you've kind of been alluding to this through the product evolution, is so important to the growth of Qualcomm?
Look, at the end of the day, I think Qualcomm it's a company that is primarily an engineering company. And I think we probably have one of the largest, as a percentage of revenue, R&D budgets. And we have been continuing to invest in fundamental R&D. We're kind of one of one, if I can say that, because, for example, even if you go back to our cellular, I think, core technology, we're probably the only company in America working on 6G right now. So I think, and that's because we're committed to long-term R&D. You have to invest at least 10 years ahead of having revenue. And for that, I think policy and how we think about the world is kind of important, because first of all, if you're investing a big percentage of your revenue in R&D, that's what we do. We do to the orders, give and take, you can say, every $4 and $1 goes back into R&D. And we're a fabulous company, so of the $4, a couple of those have been used to manufacture, to an outsourced manufacturing, the semiconductor. So with a 25% investment in R&D, the bigger you are, more R&D you have. And I think global scale is very important. I think for the innovation, it's very important that the world continue to use and rely on American technology. The more that we can have access to the global markets, the more we actually have the ability to maintain the innovation cycle, also to continue to attract, the brightest people, I think, to work on technology, for the United States. So that's the recipe that we have followed and we continue to follow. We have to make bets, and we have to make bets, ahead of the technology happen. But that's important if you want to stay ahead. And basically, if you create something that is unique and differentiated, there's always going to be demand for you.
I want to talk about AI. You alluded to it earlier, but Qualcomm is on an AI journey. And I want to ask you to address the AI opportunity you see, not only on the consumer applications, because that's obviously a big part of Qualcomm's business, but there are less talked about, perhaps, industrial applications of AI that you're also very involved in. What's the AI roadmap look like?
Yes. Look, I love talking about this, and maybe I'll talk a little bit different than what you hear about AI. But I'll spend time talking about AI at the edge. And it's important to understand that the cloud and the edge, you both have computers. You have computers in the cloud, you have computers on the edge. Like your phone has a computer on it, your PC is a computer, your car is now a computer, your future smart glasses, if you buy one, it's going to be a computer. And then your industrial devices across very industry are computers at the edge. The same way that AI continues to develop on the cloud is developing at the edge. And we started to see a lot of applications that you see with AI, but there's much more than that. We're about to see an inflection point which AI is going to run in a very pervasive way in all the computers you have at the edge. And the way that I describe this, I want to take us back to a journey of changes in user interface. Because, see, the data centers are moving where the energy is. Mm-hmm. But the devices on the edge, they stay where the humans are, right? So, like, for example, if you're using Snapdragon technology, whether it is in your Android smartphone, if you haven't tried, you should. If you use that on a Snapdragon, Copilot Plus PC from Microsoft, or probably in your car, you may not know, but there's going to be Snapdragon in the dashboard. Just an example. Those are the computers that we interact with as humans. So if I take on a journey of user interface, I think when the first personal computer started, we have an ASCII keyboard, and we all learn how to type on the ASCII keyboard with the Microsoft DOS as a text-based OS. But then something happened. The mouse came in, and the mouse came in with that. The OS changed, the computer changed, the OS changed. You have now a graphical user interface. MS-DOS changed to Windows because you have Windows that you can see, and we had to learn how to interact with that. Then phones came, smaller screen, touch, you start touching things. And the touch thing and the smartphone was so much scale that we stopped calling programs, we started calling apps because it was into the different Play Store or the App Store. And we have intuitive, sometimes you see people touching their PCs, so they have to put touch on a PC. Now we have the next big change of user interface. One of the things that Gen AI does, whether it's a large language model, large visual model, it can understand human language. So now that's going to start having a big change in how we interact with the computers, and therefore the computer is going to change. The OS is going to change. The application is going to change as a result. But that's a big change because I even I think refer to sometimes certain applications are going to become verbs. You're going to tell the agent, do this. I like telling the story when I talk about this, using the example of a banking app, because all of us have a bank app. What is your bank? It's Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whatever your credit union. You have a developer, and the developer decided how the app should look like to please most users. And you go into your phone, and you're going to have the app, and you have a menu, you have those things, and give your balance, give your last 5 transactions as an example. Well, tomorrow, the AI understands the human intention. So let's say the same way that the bank app has your credentials and authenticate with the bank mainframe, the agent of the AI, whether it could be a large language model that is your agent, you provide that your credentials can authenticate of you. So you're just going to say, what's my balance? And say, here's your balance. What's my last 5 transactions? This is my last 5 transactions. Or then you get like a bill and you say, you take a picture or you show the camera, large visual model, multimodal AI, and say, pay this, let me know when it's done. Or you can basically, you're doing a purchase of something and you just ask, do I have enough balance in my debit card? Yes, you do. Go pay for this. So it's going to change how we interact. And I think that means the AI is going to run pervasively. I like also to tell you about some of the things we're doing with Microsoft. The Microsoft Copilot Plus in May, which is a couple of months, is going to launch, actually it's next month, is going to launch the recall feature. And the recall feature is incredible. And I won't be surprised if that's going to come to your phone from different companies as well. What the recall feature does is the AI is running, because now the AI understands the context. So the AI is running all the time. And as it's running, it's indexing every pixel on your screen, and it can interpret what's in that. So you can basically say to your computer, I believe in 2 weeks, I had saw a video that talked about, there was a graphic that talked about the U.S. trade deficits with another country, and it'll say, this is the document, this is the video, this is what you saw. It will bring back to you, or it will have context. And that's true everywhere. I'm going to go shift from a PC and a phone to what is happening, for example, in industrial. Industrial, we're seeing a lot of demand for this AI that runs pervasively. For example, if I give an example, retail. Every retail store today, you bring a truck at the back of the store, you scan your products go into inventory. You get pay at the cashier, it decrements the inventory. You have this AI now, you have the AI, what is called RAG data, that you do retrieval augmentation generation, which is the real-time inventory. Somebody, like an associate, for example, get an online order, and they say, yes, this is in the store, go pick it up here, go pick it up there, go to the aisle number. Or you come into the store and say, I have $100, I need to buy dinner for 7, can you give me a recommendation? This is what you should do. That's true in the oil and gas, it's true in healthcare, many different applications. And the last that I'm gonna tell you is we're gonna see a new device that is already becoming scale, which is, we used to call them wearable smart glasses. I am now referring to them as wearable AI. If you look, for example, at this product that Meta is doing with us, which is the Ray-Ban smart glasses, that has a camera, it has a microphone, and then as you walk around, what you see, the AI see it. What you hear, they hear. So you just ask a question. Who's this person? Translate this for me. How do I get, what's the review on this restaurant? So those things are going to change how the computer's at the edge. So we're about to see a revolution, and then it's changing Qualcomm again. We've been preparing to create chips that can run this thing, pervasively, and that's how we're going to be thinking about computers at the edge. Sorry
That's
for the,
amazing. No,
sorry
it's a
for
great
the long
story.
answer, but I get excited about those.
No,
things.
it's a great story. And the last question I want to ask you, we're a little over time, but I think it's worth having you share your view on this.
I didn't want to monopolize the conversation.
No, it's good. It's good. We've had a lot of conversations today with business leaders like yourself, but also members of Congress. We've got Congressman Obernolte, we've got Congresswoman DelBene, we've got Senator McCormick coming up later this afternoon. You spend probably more time in D.C. than you'd like to because you have a company to run. You have an enormously talented team here. What are the things that you find yourself spending the most time talking to policymakers about? What are the things that you'd like to see the tech industry helping them understand about the consequences of the decision they make, or what they need to be doing to make sure that we continue U.S. leadership in technology?
Look, I go back to what I told you before. I think it's very important to understand, especially for the technology sector in companies like Qualcomm, which is a part of the semiconductor industry, but it's also a company that does a lot of fundamental, I think, R&D. It's really important to have an understanding that those companies need to have global scale. For example, the semiconductor industry has been an example of everything that wants to be accomplished. We have been on the positive direction of trade for the past 30 years. For the past 30 years, the semiconductor industry is generating surplus. We have a great exporter of American technology to the right direction of trade. 70% of the customers of the semiconductor industries is outside the United States. So it's important to maintain that scale. It's important to not to basically create a vacuum for other countries and other companies to occupy, because that scale feeds on the innovation engine. The more scale that you have, the more R&D that you have, the more that you attract people to work here on innovation, and that keeps a very positive spin. I think 30 years of success, it's a good metric.
Yeah.
And I think we need to make sure we continue doing that.
Yep, it's a good message. Cristiano, thank you so much for your history of technology, which I found fascinating, and I know our audience did as well, and also some good counsel for our work dealing with the challenging policy environment that we face here and in DC. Qualcomm's Cristiano Amon, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Joining us now is Julia Massimino, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs at ITI, with Congresswoman Suzan DelBene.
Oh, good, we do have water. All right, thanks everyone for being back with us after lunch today. It is my honor to be on stage this afternoon with Congresswoman Suzan DelBene. I want to take a second to do a little bit more of an introduction because the representative came to Congress in 2012 with a couple of decades of experience in the technology industry. And so it was no surprise that she quickly became a leader in Congress on technology issues. And she has been that ever since. And I could use about half of our time today talking about all of the leadership roles she has had in her time in DC. But since we would rather spend that time hearing from you, I'm going to be very brief and just mention two, that she was the founder and co-chair of the Digital Trade Caucus and is also now a senior member of the Ways and Means Committee, serving on both the trade and tax subcommittees. And I don't think that there are any two issues, policy areas that are going to be busier in active areas of jurisdiction this year than those two, which makes us even more grateful that you have given us some of your time today. So we knew out of the gate after the election that trade would be a very active policy area this year and in this administration. And it's hard to talk about digital trade without first getting some context for the broader trade space. For example, later today, not far from here, we're going to hear from the president about what his plans are for reciprocal tariffs. And we'll see how our trade partners around the world respond. Some of them have already responded and engaged, knowing that this is coming. But we know that trade is more than tariffs. And so if we look more broadly, where can Congress work together, and preferably also with the administration, to deliver outcomes that strengthen US trade, leadership and provide industry with the kind of certainty and opportunities that they need to be successful?
Well, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I think what's happening this afternoon kind of says it all. Nobody knows what's happening. The president has kind of said he's going to put a massive tax increase on the American people, because we know tariffs are paid by the American people, by American businesses. And no one knows exactly what's going to happen. And we're also told they're going to take effect immediately.
Right.
So when we talk about strong policy, first of all, Congress has jurisdiction over taxes and trade. This is happening without a vote in Congress. In fact, Republicans left town yesterday. We should be voting on Congress here. The president shouldn't be able to put these sweeping tariffs in place that are taxing the American people without a vote in Congress. So if you talk about working together, it's hard to say how we work together when Congress isn't involved at all. We've seen what the president has done with respect to Canada and Mexico, and turns out we have a trade agreement there that Congress did vote on that was put in place actually in the last Trump administration.
Right.
And instead of using that as our kind of foundation for trade in the region, he's kind of blowing that up and putting, sweeping tariffs in place without even a good reason for why that's happening, without a plan. So I think here we are today not knowing. It's hard to know how we actually have good plans going forward when things are random, chaotic, unstable, and we're sitting here today knowing something's coming and not even sure what it is. And the American people don't know either. I mean, people are trying to buy cars today because they aren't sure what the price is going to be tomorrow. As a business person, the uncertainty, the instability is the worst thing for our families and for our economy, and yet that's kind of what's ruling right now in this administration.
So can I chalk that up as remains to be seen?
Well, I think we've already seen it though, right? We've already seen the chaos and dysfunction and the impact it's had on costs for American families already.
Yeah.
And I have a business in my district that talked about being tariffed out of business. Just the uncertainty alone, people not being able to know for your international customers what pricing is going to be because you don't know what the president's going to do. People look to other places, and it's easy to lose business. It's hard to get it back.
Right, and so, I guess what remains to be seen is that tariffs are one tool in the trade toolbox, and so they should not function alone. They should be strategic and used to achieve certain outcomes. And so what remains to be seen is if that's what the goal is here. And I guess that's what we will see in the coming.
Well, and we did, even when we had an agreement in place, the executive doesn't seem to care. And Republicans in Congress don't seem to care either about Congress's role and authority here and standing up for that. They've kind of done everything possible to prevent us from even voting on the actions the president has taken, and definitely on the actions he's going to take later today.
You mentioned USMCA, which I think most of the folks in this audience think the digital trade provisions and that are sort of the gold standard. So let's try to focus in on digital trade. Mm-hmm. Digital trade and trade in technology products are essential to U.S. economic growth and innovation. It's nearly $1 trillion in total exports and roughly $300 billion in digital trade surplus just in 2023. This is trade that affects nearly every American business, worker, and even customers across the economy. It's not just large corporations and technology companies, but there are significant barriers to trade in many countries that risk undermining U.S. leadership. You've been a leading advocate on digital trade in Congress. Why is digital trade important? I'm curious how you explain that to your colleagues and whether they understand it, and what should the U.S. approach look like?
Well, I think you said a big chunk of it right there at the beginning, which is I think folks always thought about digital trade as being something that just was important to a few technology companies and wasn't really kind of foundational for many, many industries. And technology is part, and data flows, these are issues that impact every sector of our economy. And so coming up with what the rules of the road are for digital trade, making sure that we are participating and helping set that gold standard you talked about is critically important. And so many of our historic agreements don't have digital chapters. No one even thought about it. It's not necessarily criticism when they were done. We weren't kind of thinking about digital and the impact it was having, but we know now. And so we should be very actively pursuing making sure that we have strong digital agreements and that we're working with like-minded partners to have those agreements as opposed to letting others set the rules of the road. It's important not only to our industries, but it's important when we think about our values, wanting to make sure that we can support the free flow of data, protecting privacy. All of these things are important, and yet we're not making progress there. And these are challenges in terms of making sure we're doing trade generally, but just even updating where we're at in terms of having rules for digital trade. So we definitely made progress with USMCA, but then we kind of stalled out after that. And but our adversaries and others are still moving forward in trying to set these rules, and we need to be at the table. This needs to be important, and there's a lot at stake.
There is, and it sounds like there's at least a little bit of interest from some countries, India and the UK, EU, in having entering negotiations in the near future.
Yeah, we've had many folks want to look at coming up with digital agreements and engage there. So I think that's been important. Others want our participation in doing that. So there's not a lack of others who are interested in moving forward. I think it's been more resistance on the US side in doing that. And yet, once again, we have a policy, kind of a foundational policy in place now. But doing nothing can be really damaging. And I think some folks say, well, we either don't understand it well, so we don't know what to do, or we want to wait and think about what might be important. The other thing that has come up is what domestic policy is and the impact of domestic policy. We're behind on doing domestic policy too. When we think of things like privacy, we don't have federal privacy legislation. And the EU struck down the Privacy Shield a few years ago because they thought we needed to do more in terms of having domestic policy. That got addressed, at least for now, but we've also got to think not only on what we're doing internationally, but what we're doing at home.
Well, I could dive into that and ask you what's going to happen there in Congress this year, but we only have a few minutes left. Can I pivot to WTO for a second? As we've discussed, it's a priority to ensure that other countries aren't imposing tariffs on digital trade and data flows that are essential to innovation and economic growth and supply chain resiliency across the globe. For more than 25 years, the WTO's moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions has prevented those tariffs. Unfortunately, that agreement nearly expired last year. What should the administration and Congress do to ensure that that moratorium is maintained?
Well, something that I've supported, but I think now we have an administration that's hostile to the WTO. In fact, I'd say kind of multinational fora generally. And so that's hugely concerning in terms of how we approach this with others. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. I guess I put that in my bucket of so many things right now with the chaos and dysfunction and lack of a plan. I don't even know what they're thinking about it, but I think it is an important issue and one of many examples of things that are kind of left out there right now, given the kind of chaos from this administration.
It's interesting because the last administration didn't necessarily prioritize this either. It's sort of we have to be at the table, but the last one wasn't prioritizing it. This one may not want to be at that table. All right, we're not finding this easy yet. So let's talk about DSTs, digital services taxes, that target US companies and undermine stability and predictability of the international tax and trade system. How do DSTs hurt the competitiveness of US companies? Why is it so important for companies to have that stability and predictability in an international tax and trade system?
Well, these have been taxes that have been targeted at American companies. Right. So I think one thing we should be clear on is this has been not disproportionately impacting U.S. companies, and I understand how other countries like to say it'd be great to get revenue here, and it's coming from somewhere else. But this is a critically important issue. A lot of tax policy was developed based on physical goods and physical presence. And I think there was work in trying to address kind of how we look at digital more broadly. There's kind of been a patchwork to address digital, but I know the OECD and others were trying to get people at the table to address these issues. They're hard issues. And not everything was worked out. But again, to our earlier comment, if you're not going to participate in that process, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see folks look at this, especially when you see the tariffs being put in place and we talk about retaliation. Retaliation can come in many forms.
Right.
Instead, Canada and their DST, this is a good example of something we should have been trying to address with Canada. Instead, now we kind of have this mess with tariffs and an administration that's not recognizing a trade deal we have. And so instead of addressing the issue we really should and had a legitimate issue to address, we've kind of created this mess that folks don't know kind of how to move forward. So I think this is another issue that I'm very concerned about what it means. And again, it's targeted at U.S. companies.
Yeah. We're nearly out of time. I want to squeeze in one more question. Okay. The National Trade Estimate, NTE, was released this week. And it was notable to ITI that this year's report had an increased focus on digital trade barriers, with nearly twice as many mentions to digital trade and data localization requirements as the previous year's report. On the one hand, this could be because the previous administration was not prioritizing digital trade, to be frank. But it's also likely an indication that these trade barriers are proliferating. Next week, USTR, it was confirmed a month ago, is going to be in front of you at the Ways and Means Committee. What do you want to hear from him on digital trade?
Well, I guess my first question would be, is probably going to be higher level than that, is what is he actually doing? What's his job? Because if the president is just going to randomly put tariffs in place, is going to break trade deals that we already have, how is anyone going to do a trade deal with us in any area if the next day President Trump could decide to just throw tariffs out there? I think that is a huge concern that folks have. What is our trade policy when we're sitting here wondering what's going to happen later today? How do we get partners to work with us on legislation, on agreements, on trade, if it's unclear whether or not we're going to continue to abide by those agreements? And that would be true for digital trade as well. So absolutely want to see us do more. I think we can do more. But I think right now we have a more fundamental issue, which is we have an administration with no plan, that's been random, chaotic, unstable, and started out in a place where we actually have a recent trade agreement, oddly enough, that was done under this president, under his first administration, and they're ignoring that altogether. So what does that bode for the future in terms of moving forward? So I'd love to hear the trade representative talk about that.
Yeah. It's clear we have a lot of challenges ahead. We're very glad to have you there. We'll all be watching next week, I'm sure. And we really appreciate you being here with us today.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Are you going this way?
Please welcome MC Wellens, CNBC's DC Deputy Bureau Chief, with Eric Loeb, Executive Vice President of Global Government Affairs at Salesforce, and Manav Tiara, Senior Vice President and Technical Fellow, Data Digital Services and Engineering at Sage.
Well, thank you both for joining us. In the spirit of today's topic, AI and productivity and how to scale AI, I actually plugged the description of the panel into Perplexity and got a suggestion for a first question. So let's start there. Both of you work for companies that are helping small businesses scale their operations using AI. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us some of the unique challenges that small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses face right now deploying AI solutions. And start with you, Eric.
Sure. Well, pleasure to be here. Thanks, MC. It's interesting. I actually think for small businesses, the opportunity is even more compelling than with larger enterprises, because you think about some of the just capacity constraints that are very real. You don't have necessarily a lot of people. You have to be very thoughtful about your resources, and you're trying to do more, not only to manage your business, but to reach out and build new customers and customer relationships. So when you think about those elements and bring in something like agentic AI as a combination to, obviously, the small business owner and operator is the human very much at the helm, but you can bring in some of these tools to diminish some of the repetitive tasks or to automate some of the outreach, or, let's say there are known questions that repetitively come in, a very elevated agentic chatbot that can actually be working 24 hours a day to deflect some of these different repetitive items, and then allow that small business operator and owner to engage for those touch points where a human comes in. So I find that part for a small business is just extraordinarily compelling, and we're seeing a lot of uptake on that.
And what about you, Manav? Do you feel like it's doable, though, for a small business, let's say, that doesn't have the same kind of budget as a large corporation?
Yeah.
Maybe there's cybersecurity concerns, bringing in large amounts of data into one of these AI solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And honored to be here. For those who don't know Sage, we are a global software company serving millions of customers in more than 35 different countries. We provide software solutions in HR, payroll, accounting, and finance. We think with all the advent of these AI tools, because these are all primarily cloud-based, so this actually creates a level playing field for these small customers, because now, unlike in the past, they don't have to invest in millions of dollars in the infrastructure. They can actually pretty much at a fraction of a cost start using those tools and technology. We are seeing across the spectrum from construction, manufacturing, and all the different areas within these organizations where they are able to provide better customer service to their clients, like you were saying. They can create personalized experiences for their customers, which obviously helps ultimately in a better experience and a better bottom line for these customers, as well as they can create content using these AI tools. And they can also really operationalize and make their own internal operations more efficient, because now they can, all these repetitive tasks, they can use AI tools that instead what they had to use hours, now they can do it in minutes. So to give you a specific example, when we launched Sage Copilot about a year ago, now a small customer, instead of in the past having to go through different tools and click different applications and tabs, you can be all the time just within the Sage Copilot. And just with the click of one button, you can look at your pending invoices, you can look at the forecasting, you can benchmark your solutions, and you can reach out to those customers who in the past perhaps have been late payers. So overall, it really does improve a lot of efficiency, and they can do all this in much faster time. While, obviously there are challenges, like you said, about cybersecurity and stuff.
I love the idea of not having to do as many menial tasks, let's say, but I do think this raises a lot of questions about workforce and fear inside a workforce as digital solutions, as AI solutions, agentic technology gets deployed. How does that conversation come up when you speak to your customers, how and what recommendations might you have to those who are deploying agentic tools while they have staff and a workforce that fears losing their jobs?
So there's so many layers to this, of course, and among the many layers are, of course, some of the younger workforce is much more digitally native, of course, and so there may be an appetite and instinct to use all these tools, particularly for some of these areas that we talked about of repetitive tasks or trying to free up for other things. But a critical threshold is just ensuring that there is trust through the organization, both trust that the use of these tools and the results from them are going to result in a work product that is actually good. And we could talk at length about how you ensure that that is the case and keep working on that. The other part that feels extraordinarily important for confidence and buy-in is that an employer needs to be thinking about reskilling in a holistic way. And not only to do that as a company that is a technology customer zero user of this, but to help our customers with that. So it's not single dimensional. It's not that you just need to train people about the different uses of AI and how to use it. You also now, particularly with agentic AI, and you're thinking about human and digital labor together, have to be working on, well, what is it that the human is extraordinarily good at? So what are those human soft skills that are super important that, no matter how good an agent is, you're going to have guardrails around it, and you're going to have a handoff to a human. So the human soft skills, and then also the different business skills to ensure that someone has frankly, myself, you, Manav, all of our work and career is changing because of this technology. So we need those wraparound skills to be able to chart out, embrace the AI, understand how it can help with what you do, and understand how you have to keep changing how you work and fit in going forward. So that's one really important way we're thinking about the skilling component.
Should every company be thinking about an AI strategy right now, in your view? Or do you think there are some industries and some companies out there for whom it just might be too early? Or is that a crazy concept?
I think every industry should be looking at it. The innovation is happening extremely rapidly. So I think if you don't want to be lagging behind too much, you do need to start right away. I'll just go back to the previous question to Eric, and I completely agree with everything he said. And the approach that we at Sage have taken is that really passing the message top down to both our employees and the customers that AI is, yes, it may change the job, like you said, but it's really augmenting it. And one of the key areas is that you need to use your domain expertise that these large language models don't have. So this is why you really do need these. But back to this question, yes, we are seeing it across construction, manufacturing, you name it. It is really, really across the board. We did a survey recently about 6,000 customers, and almost 64% of them said that they really are, in some shape or form looking at AI usage. So this is not something you can ignore, and you really do have to start looking at it now.
I want to read from a recent survey of about 800 employees and 800 C-suite executives at enterprise organizations, found that just 45% of employees thought their company's AI rollout had been a success, while 75% of the C-suite thought that it had been a success. And overall, this survey found that there were a lot of divisions between the view of leadership and their staff, and I'm sort of wondering what you might make of this and what it says about where we are in the AI adoption cycle if you have leadership implementing a strategy that staff is resistant to or fears hasn't been a success. What might explain that schism?
There are a couple things. I think I'd seen that. Report, and there were other elements of it that I thought were really interesting, which included the both native digital skills or AI familiarity and use in different generational cohorts.
For sure.
And of course, as you looked at the Gen Z and millennial use is extraordinarily high.
Right.
And the cohort of the leadership was, in the low 20s? And
Sure.
so there may be in that some gap between theory and practice.
For sure.
So I guess the most important thing I've found, and it's actively practiced in Salesforce, is very open and transparent dialogue and co-creation, and a lot of grassroots development to say, look, the frontline person may have the best understanding of what are the most important tasks to be solved through agentic or generative tools and can float up some of these ideas. And many times that's where the best examples come from of how you can improve not just productivity, but satisfaction. And then the point I got at before, there has to be a leadership buy-in of ensuring that you're showing a career progression path as everybody understands that the nature of work and roles will evolve. So Salesforce developed internally a Career Connect platform. It uses AI extensively that helps to identify and map out skills that a person has and map towards skills that may be highly relevant or well-suited in the future to what you have, and then provides actually a trail of online learning to go from point A to point B. And I think measures like that create good outcomes and also improve trust.
For sure.
Yeah, to just add to what Eric said, we have taken a similar approach at Sage where it is truly the top-down message, but also the grassroots upskilling of the resources. One way which we have done within the product organization is that we have these hackathons every 3 weeks now. And it's been amazing, the uptake of the resourcing. It started with sort of a small experiment, and now we have to send people back that, no, there is just not enough room for the next hackathons, but in these last 12 months, it has been incredible success on how people are really using it. And back to your point, they are now seeing that this is actually really helping their jobs, and it doesn't matter which job it is. It could be a product manager, it could be an engineer. The engineers are using these different co-pilots that are helping them starting how to code. They are helping them how to debug their code. But at the end, it is really, really improving their productivity. Now, does that mean that everybody is super aligned? Not really, right? And this is where it's a journey that as people see more and more success, then we can build upon those successes where we can bring everybody along.
I want to pivot a little bit to Washington because here we are in DC today and talk a little bit about AI policy and sort of where things are headed. We have a new administration that it certainly seems is prioritizing AI. We have an AI czar, AI advisor. We just confirmed head of OSTP. I'm wondering if you guys had the chance to sit down with any of those individuals and pitch your policy recommendations to this administration on where you'd like to see AI policy go. What would be at the top of your list? And maybe start here with Manav.
Yeah, so absolutely. We at Sage have these constant conversations at all levels of administration, in fact, between the UK and the US governments at all levels. We strongly believe that there are two things that we would expect the federal policies to help in adoption, which is really around the digitization and also the tech enablement. And the way you do this is around two things is what we advocate at Sage. One is that you need to have a balanced AI framework. So a framework like NIST could be a great start where it balances the innovation with the risk compliance. And ultimately, it gives confidence to your small and medium businesses that they are not really going to run amok of any compliance issues, and rather they can really adopt those, which obviously ultimately helps their businesses. The second is around the little bit of the taxation and the rebates, where if we can get some rebates from the government for these customers, they can leverage that to upskill their resources in turn and also enable more technology leverage. And then second off, stuff like today, I believe, for any R&D cost, you have to capitalize all those over 5 years. So if they could take those deductions and do it within the same year, we think that will be a huge help for these small and medium businesses.
That's great.
Yeah. Great points that Manav's made. Well, I mean, first of all, it's terrific to have so many leaders in government with very substantial technology and business experience in this area. And so let's just start with that as being a very extraordinarily helpful thing. Just picking up on one thing that Manav has raised, and this is especially important from the perspective of an enterprise service provider. Our customers, whether it's the small businesses or whether it is the largest industries, highly regulated, not regulated, in addition to them wanting to see that we are going to be leaders in innovation, they also really require that the services have to maintain a high degree of responsibility and safety. And so I just think that there's this extraordinarily important point of global leadership in this area that takes into account and holds together both of those priorities of innovation and responsibility and safety, our customers will come to us, and whether there is or is not a regulatory requirement, they are going to have at the foremost of their mind, in order to use these new services, that privacy and security of their data, the ability to audit and see what the results have come from, and some degree of toxicity detection and prevention is there, so that they can use it and not have a brand impacting event.
Right.
So that's one point of hold in harmony these areas. A second thing that it's really a great pickup of just saying that the range of infrastructure needed, one part of infrastructure being skilling and that talent development, and then of course all the work on ensuring that we actually have the physical infrastructure and energy required. So those areas of policy, focus, and investment. And I guess a third point to bring something new in is ongoing international engagement. Whether it is for the companies that are helping to develop and deploy this technology, or all of our customers, there's a huge benefit in harmonization of taxonomy and frameworks so that you're not having a highly fragmented approach and having to change and deploy technology in many ways. So those would be three things I think that are super helpful to keep a focus on.
Now, we talked a little bit about this before the panel started, but one concern right now is that we've seen with DOGE some pretty significant cuts to NIST, which you brought up, Manav. The team that's working on that AI framework and taking that globally and trying to really lead the charge there. Are you concerned about some of these cuts that we've seen to the individuals who have the expertise and the wherewithal to build out a framework that allows us to lead in this area? I'll jump ball on that one.
I can jump in for a minute. You've seen across a broad range of industry a lot of support for NIST and the work that NIST has done for many years. One of the things that I always have appreciated about NIST work, whether you're talking about the work in AI or you go back to the cybersecurity framework, is it's a form of policy making that is first and foremost, kind of think of it as a scientific approach to policy making. And so having things such as a risk-based framework, which is not a static check-the-box approach, but that develops a really fluid ability to take a look at the different factors of an individual organization's activity and to give a toolkit for making adjustments and continual improvement on it. And that fits very well with my policy preference for having risk-based frameworks that can be adaptive to new developments rather than static things, and particularly with a technology like this that is every week evolving in new and unexpected ways. And we have seen that there are other jurisdictions that holds that NIST work in a lot of respect. So I do view it as a place where very good policymaking does get developed and where it is shown a lot of respect from other jurisdictions around the world.
For sure.
And I'll just add one more thing, actually go back to what Eric mentioned around one, obviously we are big advocates of NIST. It's a really good start. But even with the new administration, I think it's, on a positive note, what's really good is the collaboration, bringing all the subject matter experts in the tech industry, even ITI is playing a great role. And that, I think, connection between the subject matter tech players and the government, I think that's a really good sign going forward.
So we just have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to take the time to ask the two of you, maybe step outside of your day jobs a little bit, and you're spending all day thinking about, talking about AI, but could you give us an example of a cool application that you've seen in the world? And I'm going to borrow one from Manav because I was reading up on him on his LinkedIn page, and he was singing the praises of Google's Notebook LLM. I'm an auditory learner, and the applications for that technology are just incredible. And if you haven't seen the deep dive podcasts that are out there, they are quite cool. But what about you guys? Tell us, share your knowledge. What are you seeing out there that we might not be aware of?
I can start, yeah, thank you. One thing which I will give kudos to our friends at Salesforce is the advent of agentic stuff. I'm extremely bullish, as I know a lot of other industry players are, that how the agents will truly transform. And then AI is not really AI or large language models or small language models, or how do we fine tune them? It's really taking it away, the conversation from the engineering to an actual end-to-end experience. And at Sage, we are extremely bullish on how that will transform the industry. On a personal level, I do enjoy running a lot, mountain running, and I have been looking at creating some tools myself where if I have a particular race and I can add what vertical ascents I'm doing, what descents I'm doing, what are the aid stations, that it not only tells me and forecast my finish time in the ultra race, but it actually gives me more actionable insights into that. This is how much you should stop. This is how much you should eat. It's just so much fun stuff that we could go on forever.
It's really funny. There's like a lot of similarity of interest here. First of all, I will give a shout out to Notebook LM for everyone if people have not used it. Similarly, I best learn by listening, and I do really long cycling rides safely, but with just an earbud in my right ear, and I can actually just listen to what otherwise would have been a 180-page document to read.
Yes.
And so I love that. And I've used some similar things for training. I guess just given what day it is today, I'll actually give a work example of something really interesting that just shows how agentic AI can be very helpful. So a couple of months ago, one of my colleagues developed an import specialist agent. And this agent takes the about 4,500-page harmonized tariff guidelines, and it allows somebody to just type in a single thing that they are planning to import and to get the current treatment of it. So, but
I might be able to use this in my reporting.
So very interesting and gentle things. Say, type in avocado and say, what is the duty going to be on this? And they'll say, from what country? Organic or not organic? So I just bring this up as an example of, again, this is human and digital labor together, but in an extraordinarily complex, fast-moving, very large document of really importance, you could now, within seconds, get guidance. And this is very important to go across every single industry, and people are trying to plan and think about things. Tools like this really transform how you can work.
For sure. It does seem like the conversation around AI can really shift from one of skepticism to one of surprise and excitement the minute you experience something that either makes your life better, makes your work better, delivers you information in a way that you hadn't received it before. But until you reach that point, I think there's a significant amount of skepticism, whether it's in like the corporate environment or one's personal life. And I don't know how you solve for that other than time, and then the role that your companies play in educating workforces around solutions to make that work better, easier.
And adding, I think, the trust factor, that's a really key thing. That's one of the things which we clearly hear from our customers and internal employees as well, that of course from an engineering perspective, there are issues in the reliability of these models. But it's that general tendency of the people to say, well, do I really trust AI? So I think a lot of education around that and kind of going back to having these risk frameworks and stuff, I think that is the way we really get everybody to trust these things.
I couldn't agree more. It is the most important thing. And to your point, I think it's critical to keep holding together both that optimism and that skepticism, because it's so important not to be complacent. And we have developed, we call it our trust layer, and it has a lot of features on it. But between the elements that were required for that trust layer when generative AI was being deployed, and now as agentic AI is being deployed, we've had to keep adding additional features in it. And the constant innovation and development around trust, safety, and security, it's driven by the needs of our customers, but it's also driven by this ongoing curiosity of what could we do, but also what do we need to be thoughtful about. So that's the most critical nature, I think, of maintaining confidence that users have to use these tools, is they need to have the confidence that it will result in outcomes that they can rely on.
Well, that seems like a great note to end on. We are out of time. Thank you both very much, and on to the next panel.
Thank you for having us.
Next up on the Intersect stage, Brian Huseman, Vice President of Public Policy and Community Engagement at Amazon.
I'm Brian Huseman at Amazon. I'm an ITI board member and former chair of the ITI board. I want to thank Jason Oxman and the entire ITI team for such a great summit. I'm happy to introduce this next session, and I'm first going to introduce my boss, David Zapolsky. He's Chief Global Affairs and Legal Officer at Amazon. David's been at Amazon for over 25 years and helped build the legal team into just a world-class and global organization, and has spent the last couple of years advocating for policies that promote American leadership and drive innovation and benefit our customers. And I'm also privileged to introduce Senator Dave McCormick, who was elected to represent Pennsylvania in the Senate last year. He's already shown himself to be a strong voice for innovation and for policies that enable economic investment and jobs in Pennsylvania and across the entire country. Now, the senator also co-authored a book, Who Believed in You, with his wife, Dina Powell McCormick. It was just released yesterday and discusses the importance of mentorship, which is a really passionate topic of mine. I'm excited to have a national discussion on this topic. And I believe there are some books for the audience, for attendees, where you had lunch, but there's also a little online store where you can buy a book with speedy delivery too, if you need to as well. So please join me in welcoming David Zapolsky and Senator Dave McCormick to the stage.
Thank you for taking the time, Senator McCormick. It's great to be here with you. It's great to be back at ITI Intersect. I thought I'd start off by talking about something I know is a focus for Amazon and for you, and that's driving America's economic future forward. At Amazon, we're making big investments across the country, including significant investments in your home state of Pennsylvania, which is vast energy resources, a skilled workforce, and is prioritizing innovative technologies across a number of sectors. I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about economic development and the relationship between the public and the private sector.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you, David, for interviewing me, and thank you all for being here and inviting me to join. And I don't know if Bruce Melman's here, but Bruce, a special call out to Bruce for reaching out on this invitation. You know, I think we're at this incredible consequential moment. I feel honored to be in the Senate, honored to represent Pennsylvania, in part because of the moment we're in. And, as a business guy for 25, almost 30 years, the engine, the driver, is the private sector, and I recognize that. And so government needs to be a good partner, in large part by getting out of the way, but not entirely. What I mean by that is we are facing a moment where the intersection of the energy revolution and artificial intelligence and the energy needs and the advancements from an innovation perspective that can follow are all coming together. And in Pennsylvania, we have bountiful energy, but we need to make it very easy for people to invest, for investors to invest. That's deregulation in the energy sector, regulation that protects people, but not regulation that makes it harder to do business. We have regulation on top of regulation in many cases. And I think also helping provide the basis for skilled labor, for skilled workers. The private sector and the public sector can work closely. It starts with fixing our schools, but we can do a lot for building the kind of skilled labor that Pennsylvania has traditionally been known for, but we need it across the country. And then finally, we have to have sound economic policy, because when I travel and talk to business people and innovators starting new businesses, inflation, regulation, and skilled workers are the three big barriers to growth. I always ask the question, what's it gonna take to grow? And I always get those three answers back. So we need to be sound, prudent caretakers for the public good, but partnering with business in a way that largely lets innovation flourish.
Well, as you know, Pennsylvania is an important state for Amazon. We've spent over $26 billion, invested over $26 billion over the years, and we have 30,000 employees in Pennsylvania, and we're looking at more investments.
Hallelujah.
You've been very vocal about the technology race between the US and China, and one of my messages this week to lawmakers that I get to talk to is that race is real. If you doubted that the American technological leadership is under threat, you only need to look at DeepSeek from a few months ago to know how narrow that lead is. It's clear that U.S. technology leadership in a number of spaces, AI, cloud, robotics, can provide a real national security advantage for the U.S. Where do you think we stand in the race, especially given the critical moment we're at? And what more can the U.S. do to win?
Well, I think, I have friends, I come from the investing world, and, I have some of the people I know are long China and short America. They think we got rough waters ahead, and the Chinese model may succeed. I'm not. I'm long America and I'm short China, but it depends on what we do. It is in our hands, and we could mess it up. It's very possible we could mess it up. And there's really two pieces. One is holding China to account. China has stolen intellectual property for a decade. Keith Alexander, who was the head of NSA, said the greatest theft in the history of the world is the intellectual property stolen by China. China has unfair trading practices. China has taken a very mercantilist approach to playing a dominant position around the world. And China is on the march. And they are a true adversary that we should not take lightly. But the core to success is frankly what we do here, and letting flourish the building blocks of what's made America great. And that is a great education system that needs to be renewed, both at the secondary school level through school choice, but also our universities, letting them flourish in terms of science. It's an investment in basic research. I'm on the one hand very supportive of reducing the cost of government, as I think we're doing with some of the efforts under President Trump. And at the same time saying we should probably make more significant investments in basic research, because we're at an all-time low compared to in the period since 1950 in terms of our investment in basic research. And we have to embrace the point I made earlier about a regulatory environment, an investing environment that allows entrepreneurs to flourish and fail. Because one of the great benefits of our system is the fact that people fail and learn from the failure and are able to innovate based on the failure. And you're never going to get that with Big Brother in the form of the government putting too heavy of a hand on the scales.
Thanks. That's an incredibly important observation. I think one of the policy frames that I think, at least I've started to articulate when I get the chance to speak to people like you, is our government's efforts going to unlock innovation and enable us to move faster? Or are we going to do something that will slow down American leadership, that will cause us to have to stop and take longer? Because that race is real, and China is not going to wait and
not gonna stand
for the
still.
same things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Contrary to what many people have expected, at Amazon we've continued to see the acceleration of new technologies lead to more jobs, not less. Our workforce has continued to grow in size while expanding the use of AI and machine learning. How do you think about AI's impact on the American workforce, and what can industry and government do to support the US workforce and prepare for continued innovation in AI and by AI?
Well, I start by thinking about it as sort of like a wave coming in from the ocean, in the sense that the question, you can't stop the wave. So then the question is, how do you adapt to the wave and take advantage of the wave to the extent possible? So first, the wave offers us enormous opportunity for building new infrastructure. In my state of Pennsylvania, there's enormous opportunity for our skilled workforce, for our trades that they haven't had for years. There's an ongoing opportunity to be support for these incredible data centers. There's a growing demand for the kind of computer scientist and capability that we have in places like Carnegie Mellon and Penn State and University of Pennsylvania. So there's a whole set of opportunities that come with the tens of billions of dollars, the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that we have seen and expect to see in Pennsylvania. At the same time, it's highly disruptive. And you can't keep your head down and avoid the disruption. And so having skilled training that helps people adopt. One of the things that I've come to grips with, I grew up on a college campus. My dad was a college president for a state college. I grew up thinking that the only path to success in the American dream was going to college. You got to go to college. You got to go to college. Everybody's got to go to college. I think completely differently about that now. I think that we need to be able to train people for the skills that are required for the moment. This is where government and industry can work together. We've got incredible partnerships with the energy industry and and community colleges in Pennsylvania for next generation fracking workers. I think we need to adopt and modify Pell Grants to be much more supportive of the next generation of skills. I think the GI Bill, which I took advantage of coming out of the Army, I went to grad school using the GI Bill. I think that needs to be adapted to support a broader array. This is an area where I think government and industry have very much aligned interest, and you got to get out in front of it, because as you say, the great advantages of this innovation are going to be new opportunities, but it's also probably going to eliminate some of the current opportunities we have.
Yeah, I think that's an important insight, is that you don't necessarily need college to succeed. One of the things we've done at Amazon is we've open sourced many of our own trainings to enable people to access training, to get access to cloud skills. And we made 3 years ago, we made a commitment to offer training on AI and AI skills, not just the sort of programming piece, but how to work with AI to improve productivity and other types of skills. And we've set a goal to make that available to 2 million people. We've already done that for 20 million people for cloud skills.
Yeah.
And I think, as other companies do the same, I think there's
a good point. The opportunity for leverage learning, for lack of a better term, to be able to help people learn in a fundamentally different way. That's also, I guess, one of the great benefits of this moment.
Absolutely. As we think about this topic of U.S. leadership in AI, there is a link to energy demand.
Yeah.
I know you've been very passionate about energy and grid capacity needs and how they're tied to economic growth. How are you addressing this critical issue and to ensure that the U.S. maintains its technological edge?
Yeah, well, I've the good fortune of being on the Energy Committee, which was the main committee I requested. And I think my starting point is, obviously I'm representing the people of Pennsylvania, so I'm trying to be very parochial in terms of my focus. And my starting point is, if you were the man from Mars and you landed in America and you said, what state could I go to build my next generation data centers and make big investments, I'd say Pennsylvania. And the reason for that is we have abundant energy. We're the #2 natural gas producer in the United States, 4th largest natural gas reserve in the world, big fossil fuel coal base, a big nuclear capacity. And on top of that, we have an incredible skilled workforce. So we have the trade unions, which are able to build these data centers, as I said to you backstage. I've come to know, having talked to lots of people in your business, that speed is the name of the game in terms of thinking about your investments. So we need to have a regulatory environment that's conducive to that. And then the final thing about Pennsylvania is we are within 500 miles of 65% of the population. So if you think about those assets, now the question is, how do we position ourselves so we can be most appropriate for attracting those companies that want to innovate, invest, and have speed? And so we need to have permitting reform that unlocks our energy. We need to have regulatory reform that makes it easier for site approvals, water approvals, electricity. We need to have skilled workforce partnerships with companies like yours and these community colleges or other sources of training. We need to have great partnerships between Republicans and Democrats. So in my state, I'm one of 2 senators. The other senator, Senator Fetterman. He and I have struck up a good relationship. We don't agree on everything. We don't agree on a lot, but we figured we're going to work together on the things we agree on. Same with Governor Shapiro. I've got a relationship with him. We're both trying to grow opportunity and jobs in Pennsylvania. So I think that's the portfolio of things that I need to do, that we in the public sector need to do to make it much easier for guys like you, for people in this audience, to invest in Pennsylvania. I view myself as not company specific, but sort of the head of business development. Like my job is to get out there and make sure Pennsylvania's best foot is put forward.
That is terrific to hear. That's the type of attitude I think business is going to encourage everyone to work together on these goals. I think one of the things that I don't know if people are putting this together or not, but if you look at Amazon and the levels of investment that we've signaled that we're going to make in this technology, and you look at Microsoft and Google and the companies that are at the forefront of AI, the investment levels are really mind-boggling. They're hundreds of billions of dollars per year. If CHIPS and Science Act was $50 billion one time. So think about 3 times, 4 times that every year for the next several years. The one constraint on companies like Amazon being able to deploy and invest that capital is energy. That's the biggest constraint. And so we need all hands on deck. One of the things we've done is invest in small modular nuclear reactors, which is a really promising technology, but is not here yet.
And the permitting is taking too long.
The permitting issues. We've invested in acquired land in Pennsylvania we've acquired an area with an existing nuclear power plant, which we're going to make into a data center.
Microsoft did the same, of course, with Three Mile Island. Yeah.
So I think you'll see companies like Amazon looking far and wide for all opportunities to bring more generation capacity.
And here's the way. I couldn't agree more. And with this in mind, we have after I won the election, I had a chance to sit down with Secretary Burgum, Secretary Wright, and then President Trump. And I made the point that I want to create an energy innovation summit in Pennsylvania, probably late in the second quarter. President agreed to be part of that. And the idea would be to bring all those forces to bear in Pennsylvania. We have the energy producers. You have the 4 or 5 big platforms, 6 big platforms that probably are going to be 3 in the next 3 to 5 years, right? The idea is there's a fight, a competition underway. You have the building trades that are going to be the key to speed to delivery. It's a speed game. You have big capital. Sometimes it's going to be capital from you. Sometimes it's going to be capital from the sovereign wealth funds. It might be capital from the BlackRocks or the Brookfields of the world. And you're going to have government policymakers, in this case the federal level, but also the key state officials. And that combination of people around the table should be able to solve all the problems to make this leap. But it's not a small undertaking. The data I've seen, and you would know better than I, like we're going to have 3 times the energy demand that we've had, and our infrastructure moves too slow. The regulatory process moves too slow. We need huge, huge investments. And by the way, the moment investments in big data start to mean that people have blackouts and they can't heat their homes, then you're going to have a huge political problem. So the only path through this is generating enormous new production capacity and doing that in a very accelerated way.
Yeah, I think that's all exactly right. Definitely we'll join you at the summit in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, hope we'll see you there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
For sure. Looking forward to that. Now, I want to leave time because yesterday you released a new book that you and your wife wrote. Amazon, in case you don't know, if you pre-order a book, it will arrive on the day of release. So we have them. There are books in the lunch area where the lunch programming was that are available for everyone in the audience. But I wanted to ask you, it's Who Believed in You? How Purposeful Mentorship Changes the World, which is an incredibly important topic, and I think an interesting one. And what prompted you to write the book?
Thanks for highlighting it. My wife and I, we have 6 daughters between us, 24 to 18. We have a blended family. And during COVID, we were all locked up together. And we started to notice there was a couple years where our kids didn't have access to coaches, teachers, the kind of mentors that had made a huge difference for Dina and me. And so we started to talk to them about the mentors in our lives. And in my case, a high school football coach changed my life, helped me get into West Point. It changed everything. In my wife's case, a senator, Kay Bailey Hutchison, who probably some of you know, who plucked her out of, she was waitressing in Dallas, or in Austin, plucked her out and made her an intern, and that changed her course. And we started to talk to friends that we know, people, very well-known people to this room. Satya Nadella, Governor Sarah Huckabee, Governor Wes Moore, Brian Grazer, who won the Oscar for A Beautiful Mind. And all of them had the same story. 1 or 2 people changed everything. And so we eventually turned the project into a book. And the book is called Who Believed in You? And it's about the power of mentorship. And we talk about all these famous people, but the book isn't about the famous people. It's about the people you never heard of who made the famous people famous, who helped them achieve all they could achieve. And we all probably look at the TV these days. I certainly do. There's so much going on. There's a lot of polarization. Sometimes you ask yourself, what can I do? And the message in the book is we can all have a huge impact by helping someone achieve their purpose. And in doing so, you can change your community, change the world, as these mentors did. So for all of you, the 3 questions we ask in the book: who believed in you? Number 2, have you said thank you? Because the thing that came across these interviews is people say, oh, I never told them how much they matter to me. And then the 3rd question is, what are you doing? What are you doing, all of us who've been so fortunate, what are you doing to pay it forward? What are you doing to help someone? Who are you believing in? And I'll ask you, David, who believed in you? Who made the big difference?
Well, I was very lucky to have a number of meaningful mentors in my career and in my life. But I would, one of the obvious ones was I had the privilege of working with Jeff Bezos for the 20 years we overlapped when he was CEO. And Jeff, working with Jeff, you walk away with a lot of wisdom over time. And he obviously changed the trajectory of my life. One piece of advice that he once gave me, and I've heard him give others, he's often asked to predict the future. How do you predict the future? And Jeff's response was interesting and useful. He said, the future is hard to predict. Things are changing so quickly. You're much better off if you can identify the things that won't change, the things that aren't subject to change. And so for Amazon's business, if we know that customers are always going to want lower prices, they're going to want bigger selection, they're going to want the best products and services that enterprises can consume, and they're going to want convenience. And so if you optimize your investments to improve the things that you know won't change in 10 years, in 3 years, customers aren't going to wake up and want higher prices, right? You know that. Then your return on that investment is much more guaranteed, and it gives you sort of a North Star to go toward. And you're also in a better position to deal with the changes as they come, because you know kind of where your keel is. So
that's great. That's great advice. And those are the kind of pearls that are in the book. The one thing I will say about the book, I don't know if Jeff talked to you about this, but almost every famous person that we interviewed, these very successful people, they all had failed. Kind of failure is part of being successful. You fail on your way to success. You learn through the failing. But people deal with failure differently. You have to have the strength and the resilience to get off the mat. You have to have the tough skin to get the feedback you need to improve. And so mentors can play a huge role in giving you the tough love, and then helping you take the risk, like Jeff took when he left New York and started Amazon, and be resilient in the face of failure, because failure is just a step along the way to success.
What would you say is the most meaningful advice you received, or that you learned about in the course of interviewing folks for the book?
Well, I would say, it seems kind of trite, but I would say that with the benefit of the success that many of these people have had, and the fact that they had failed, many had failed along the way, there wasn't anybody that I encountered that said, I wish I wouldn't have taken the risk. In other words, I don't think people look back on their life and say, I didn't play it safe enough. I wish I would have played it safer. I think people look back on their lives too often and say, I wish I would have taken the risk. And I've tried to internalize that lesson. And once I lost a big race in politics, and it was hard. But once you've sort of tasted that, you can get through it. And I got fired. But from being a CEO of one of the big financial firms. It was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. You think, oh my God, that's unthinkable. And then it happens, you're like, okay. And then I got to be a CEO again and succeeded. So the key advice is, don't put yourself in a position where you ever think you're going to look back and say, oh, I wish I would have. Live your life in terms of leaning forward, leaning into it. The worst that can happen is you fail, and you'll probably learn from that anyway. And I think that's a good mantra to teach our kids.
I agree. Jeff has a version of that story, which he calls the regret minimization framework. You don't want to wake up when you're 80.
He's got too big of a brain for me.
You don't want to wake up when you're 80 and think, wow, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd taken this risk.
A life of no regrets.
So for folks in the audience and for folks like me, what's the best way to start mentoring? Like, how do you
well, we talk about that, and my wife has been an incredible mentor and has created these national programs, global programs, 10,000 small businesses, 1 million black women, and others that have helped many people through their mentorship. But there's 4 building blocks of a great mentorship. This isn't transactional. You're not trying to figure out how to get the next promotion. you're trying to help people find their purpose and live a life. And to do that, you need to have 4 things. 1 is trust. You need to be able to be trusting of both sides of the relationship. 2, you need values. We're not just talking about success in monetary terms. We're talking about a values-based life, values-based leadership. So you're trying to help them on that journey. The 3rd is commitment, because you don't have to have 3-hour lunches every 2 weeks, but you have to be available at the moment the person needs you. The crisis, the opportunity, the choice, it doesn't come on your schedule. It comes when it comes, and so you need to be there. And then the 4th is confidence. Tying back to failure, tying back to taking risk. You need to give your mentee confidence that they can succeed, they can step forward, they can learn, they can grow. And it's not one way. This is, I think when you get a little further along, like I'm in my life, you start to see as much for you in a mentoring relationship as you see for the mentee. It's a way to feel like you've really contributed. We had a TV over the weekend with Mark Levin, who you guys probably know is a big conservative talk radio guy, very, very, very fire-breathing conservative. And he stopped in the middle of his show and he said, when it's all done, when your life comes to an end, what do you look back on? You look on the relationships that mattered most and what difference you were able to make in those relationships. And I think it's one of the reasons the book's completely apolitical. Republicans, Democrats, all sorts of business, Hollywood, David Chang, a famous chef. It's because this is something that transcends politics. It's something about the kind of life you want to lead, the kind of person you want to be. It's almost spiritual in terms of the importance.
Well, on that note, we're all about out of time. I want to thank you very much for sitting here with me and answering these questions. I also want to thank you for serving. It's not something you had to take on at this point in your career, and we need good people in government on every side of the aisle. So thank you very much.
Honored to be here. Thanks so much. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Please welcome Courtney Lang, Vice President of Policy at ITI, joined by Congressman Jay Obernolte and Drew Badgley, Chief Privacy Officer at CrowdStrike.
All right, well, hello, everyone. We are, I think, the last panel of the day. So, we get to continue our really exciting conversations, and we're going to be focusing today on the nexus of cybersecurity and AI. And I know both of you have, specific thoughts to share with us about this really important nexus. I think we've talked earlier today about the importance of securing AI systems, and we've also heard a little bit about the really unique ways in which AI is being used to bolster cybersecurity. So I hope to touch on both parts of the conversation in the 20 minutes that we have here today. But Congressman, maybe I will start with you. I know that you have been doing quite a lot of thinking about AI and Congress's role and approach to AI writ large. You co-chaired the task force. You guys put out a very robust report last year, and certainly kind of AI and national security and cybersecurity in particular was one part of that report. And so I was wondering if we could start by just having you share a little bit more about your perspectives on kind of the role of AI and national security, and in particular, some of the ways in which AI might be used to kind of uplift cybersecurity, just kind of a general perspective on that, and then we can dive a little bit more deeply into that.
Sure. So as you're aware, we had a whole chapter on national security issues on AI when we wrote the report last year. And it's kind of a bad news, good news, bad news situation. I mean, the bad news is AI is an incredibly powerful tool for enhancing productivity. We say bad people are going to bad, and they're going to bad more productively with AI than without it. And it's going to be a particularly potent tool for cyber attacks, for fueling those cyber attacks. So that's bad news. Good news, it's an equally powerful tool for recognizing when attacks are occurring and being able to deter those attacks and stop them. Pattern recognition is what AI is best at, and detecting attacks is something that it can do very successfully. So that's good news. The bad news, though, is that some of the most vulnerable vectors for cyber attacks are the ones that are human related. And we are already seeing this surge of for example, spear phishing attacks powered by AI across the country. And it turns out that convincing someone to click on a malicious link or release some information or some credentials that they shouldn't is not that difficult to do. And that's going to continue to be a problem. And so that's a much more difficult issue to solve because AI really isn't a part of that vulnerability. So that's something that we're going to have to grapple with as a society.
Yeah, understood. Drew, I would love to build on that a little bit. And from your perspective at CrowdStrike, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about how you all are seeing the threat landscape evolve with the introduction of AI? You know, what are you seeing kind of both malicious actors using AI for? Also, we can get into how AI is being used to improve cybersecurity, but would just love your kind of overview to set the stage a little bit more.
Yeah, we definitely, I can declare that with our data, we see bad guys are batting a lot to build off of that. One of the things to even just kind of conceptualize or put into context how adversaries are leveraging AI in the early stages with cyber attacks is today, if we just look at the speed with which adversaries are able to carry out cyber attacks, the speed that we're all up against as defenders is not much time at all. So on average, an adversary can move from one system, one endpoint, to another laterally within 48 minutes. The breakout time is 48 minutes. And the fastest we've ever seen was an adversary got onto a system and then was able to move on to another system within 51 seconds. So when you're up against that speed, whether it's 51 seconds or 5 minutes or 48 minutes, and then you think about, as you said, Congressman, the speed and the scale with which AI enables us to do anything, and you're then applying that to your ability to infiltrate a system, that's where we really need AI similarly to increase the speed and the scale for defenders. In terms of the life cycle of a breach and how adversaries are leveraging AI, there's the lure crafting. And that's one where, from a data standpoint, it's fascinating. There was a study a couple of years ago where when you're talking about phishing lure emails crafted without AI by humans, there's about a 12% click rate. When you talk about ones leveraging AI, where the adversaries used an LLM to craft a better, more targeted phishing email, then it goes up to 52%. So that's pretty staggering. And that's just with today's generative models. Imagine when that gets a little better, as they're getting better all the time. Then you move on into if you're able to get a hold of crash dumps from memory, and you're able to do fuzzing with AI and find vulnerabilities that are in code, and then leverage those. So in other words, you're finding your means to exploitation faster. And then once you actually exfiltrate data, what you can do is you can throw all of that into AI and much more quickly figure out what's good, what's bad, what's going to be useful with the credentials you've stolen or whatever valuable data you've obtained, and be able to weaponize that and leverage that. And all this is going on in this context where all these tools are becoming much more accessible. So you have this democratization of destruction, really, that AI is enabling, in the same way that AI, though, is enabling all of us to have speed and scale with everything we do. And that's something that, AI has been in cybersecurity for a long time since the inception, but now the stakes are higher because it's with the adversaries, too.
Sure, yeah. Something that you mentioned, Congressman, that I would love to kind of drill down on a little bit further is, of course, and Drew, you as well, have talked about, the way in which adversaries are leveraging AI. And so in your report, you have some recommendations about kind of the ways in which not only can we kind of work to address those concerns, but also the ways in which AI can be used to, again, improve the cybersecurity of federal systems, for example. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about kind of what we need to do to make that happen. What is the role of Congress in advancing that type of uptake? But then more broadly, is there a role for Congress in trying to preclude some of this adversarial activity? Kind of what is the role of Congress there?
Right. I think that that's something everyone is grappling with. And we have a very concrete answer to that question in the report because one of the fundamental questions we were confronting was, do we follow the lead of entities like the European Union and centralize the regulation of artificial intelligence? Or do we follow a decentralized, more sectoral model, which is one that seems better suited to the way that we approach governance here in the United States? And we concluded that it was a no-brainer that the sectoral approach was the way to go. And we also had the benefit of having a little bit more time to be thoughtful about it, because the EU had made this decision years ago, before even large language models became powerful, but certainly way before generative AI. If you look at the risk management framework that NIST put out last year, which has been acknowledged as probably the most useful document for analyzing the potential risks of AI deployment that's been produced anywhere in the world, what the report makes clear is that the risks of deployment are highly contextual. So it matters very much what you're going to do with the AI when you evaluate what the risks are. And that's incredibly important, because that means that something that's unacceptably risky in one usage context might be completely benign in another context. And that's why sectoral regulation is the way to go there. So now we need to operationalize all of that. We have another threat that's more of an economic threat, not a cybersecurity threat, but we've got thousands of bills pending in state legislatures across the country on the topic of AI regulation. And so if we fail to take action in Congress, we are running the risk that all of the states are going to get out ahead of us, as they have on digital data privacy. And in short order, we're going to have 50 different standards for what constitutes safe and trustworthy deployment of AI. And that's very destructive, not only for our ability to innovate with AI, but also very destructive to innovation, very destructive to entrepreneurialism. So we need to now take this year that we have in Congress, this year of legislative runway, and be able to bake in some of the recommendations that we made in that report, so that we can do our jobs and then tell the states where the guardrails are on preemption, what's interstate commerce related, and outside of those guardrails, where they're free to innovate and be the laboratories of democracy that they are. So we need to get the let out.
Fair enough. Yes, I know the mountain of bills has certainly been concerning for many of the companies that operate in the United States and globally, right? We represent companies that are operating all around the world. You mentioned the European Union. So to have such a patchwork of compliance regimes would be, really problematic, and as you know, challenging for innovation. Drew, I wanted to ask you, so, I think on the coming out of the coronavirus era, we saw the introduction of generative AI and ChatGPT, and there was quite a lot of attention from, of course, consumers, but also policymakers around generative AI. It seems like we're now kind of moving into the next evolution of the technology, which is agentic AI. Certainly, we are seeing some companies introduce kind of limited versions of agentic AI, and I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit more about agentic AI in the cybersecurity context and what that looks like. I mean, are you all using agentic AI? Can you explain to us a little bit about what that is, and specifically, of course, in cybersecurity, how you all are kind of leveraging that?
Absolutely, yeah. We're absolutely innovating with agentic AI, and to just backtrack a little, the way cybersecurity and AI have been intertwined for quite a long time has really been traditionally with machine learning. So you'd have a lot of machine learning about what does a normal event look like, what does an anomalous event look like, and that's how you would be able to, with enough data, detect when an adversary was even leveraging some sort of zero-day or some sort of even hands-on keyboard attack that otherwise you wouldn't be able to detect. You wouldn't have been able to detect 15 years ago with the way that companies oriented around whether or not a file was malicious or not, a binary determination. So fast forward to today, along that journey, what you're able to do now that you can couple the traditional machine learning with large language models is you can have agentic AI make real-time decisions based off of leveraging other AI models. So essentially, if you're a defender, there are certain tasks, and especially when we think about the workforce shortage we have with all things cyber, there are certain tasks that would require a whole lot of skill and time to do a lot of queries, pivot off of different data points, and then make a determination about what you need to do given any sort of threat. One of the ways in which we've incorporated our agentic AI, which we call Charlotte AI, is with detection triage. So you can have a detection in the platform, determine that something is malicious, and then based off of the decisions made historically with all sorts of similar types of threats, you can get a suggestion about what type of action should be taken to triage that threat and handle that threat, and then accept to take that action, and then the action will be taken by the AI. And the AI will do all of the tasks that would have previously required somebody going through, spending the time, and it could be anything from removing files, changing configurations, anything like that, especially when you think about vulnerabilities, patching, all of that. And you can do that in an automated fashion. And so that is going to be the future of cybersecurity, is going to be that agentic AI. Now, you have to do that within guardrails. You have to do that within the conditions you set. This isn't something where, we all know large language models have hallucinations. Just the other week, I was asking it something after seeing Hamilton about Alexander Hamilton, and the AI lied to me and claimed that Aaron Burr rented from the Hamilton family after killing Hamilton, and which turned out not to be true. So you can imagine that those types of things where if you don't have the proper guardrails, you're not actually doing validation, and you're not ensuring that the data is good to begin with, you're going to have those problems. And that's where it's really important to get that balance right. But it's absolutely necessary to be promoting this sort of innovation and thinking about what you can do with AI instead of starting with what you can't do and fully regulating around that. And so that's where it makes a lot of sense with context. There's some contexts where that's very obvious, what you don't want to do. There's other contexts where it's actually not obvious what you don't want to do, and it's very obvious what you need to do to keep up with threats.
Understood. Congressman, is there anything that agentic AI is kind of presenting in conversations that you're having with other folks on Capitol Hill or elsewhere, or is it kind of just the next evolution and people are generally still trying to grapple with how to think about AI generally and kind of what the right governance approach is? I'm just curious if there's any kind of new considerations that are coming to the fore as the technology continues to evolve.
There absolutely is. And if you think about our conversations around TikTok in the last several years, and the reason why Congress took the very unusual and for some of us unnatural step of telling American consumers that this was a piece of software that was not safe for them to use, is the concern that harmful personal data could end up in the hands of a geopolitical adversary. And we have that exact problem in spades with agentic AI. Because agentic AI, to be able to act as your agent, is going to require a stunningly large amount of very personal, very potentially private data about you, not only your finances, but your preferences, and a whole history of what you've done, where you've gone. And we have to be very thoughtful and mindful about who has access to that data and under what circumstances. And that's one of the reasons why the proliferation of DeepSeek has been such a concern to us, not just because of its capabilities, but more importantly because we don't know where that data is going, and we suspect that it has the same vulnerabilities that TikTok did. So that's something that is very concerning about agentic AI, and I think we're going to have a monumental task ahead of us of educating Americans about the need to be careful and the need to establish a relationship of trust with whoever is acting as your agent, particularly if it's done by automation.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. I think trust is certainly key in this whole conversation. Drew, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the flip side of the conversation, right? We've been talking a little bit about the ways in which cybersecurity can be improved by AI. Obviously, as you just noted, there is also, I think, the really important part of the conversation, which is how do we ensure that AI systems are developed, and deployed securely? And so, wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about that. What steps are you taking to kind of make sure that AI is being deployed securely in the settings that you are deploying it in, and any other kind of broader considerations that we should be keeping in mind?
Yeah, I think one of the key things to ensuring that you have good data, which I was referencing a moment ago, is that you actually have a continual feedback loop. And your feedback loop involves humans who are actually validating that what you're putting in and what you're getting out makes sense together. And that's something that in the cybersecurity context, for example, the way we do that is we have our threat hunters actually being the ones that are validating what's going into our model, what's coming out, making sure that makes sense. The data is bounded to actual cybersecurity data, to computer telemetry, you can't just use any data to make these sorts of cybersecurity decisions and all of that. And then same thing is we have humans that are in the actual decision-making loop. So in other words, you have suggested actions with event triaging, and then it's up to the defender to make that decision whether or not they want to follow the suggestion or not. And then we make it very transparent what's going to happen in terms of those steps. So what we're doing is we're reducing the need to actually individually do all of the tasking, but we're not reducing the transparency with what the taskings actually are, or where the data comes from, or how that decision came to be. And I think that's really important. So when we talk about transparency, if we go back decades ago, we talk about transparency with privacy, and then we got these privacy notices that today are this long and nobody reads them. With AI, it's really important to get it right and not do that in the same way, to get transparency about how decisions are being made, where they're coming from, and then to understand if something is bounded or not bounded. So with natural language, when you're trying to understand natural language, maybe for those models, you're going to treat that a lot differently than what you're going to do with the actual actions you're taking on a computer. And so that's something where, too, when we think about agentic AI, since you're relying upon lots of different models, that's going to look a bit different with every model, and that's really important for the users to actually understand what's happening. So I think that's important, and then to just think very broadly about the data itself and think about privacy by design, as you should with anything you're designing, to really think about that with AI from the beginning. Otherwise, you could invariably create some sort of privacy time bomb where you've built everything off of something that wasn't necessarily good to begin with, and now you've corrupted the whole thing, the fruit of the poisonous tree problem.
Sure. Congressman, curious if you see a particular role for Congress in making sure that AI systems are deployed securely. Drew was talking about transparency, whether there is a particular role for Congress there.
No, absolutely there is. But it's a complex topic because, as we were discussing before, when you talk about regulation, the context of your usage of AI and its deployment is what's going to determine how much regulation is needed. And so there are some usages where obviously there's going to be intense scrutiny. I mean, if I'm going to have a pacemaker implanted and the manufacturer of that pacemaker has used artificial intelligence to monitor my heart rate, I hope that the FDA has taken a really good hard look at that. And you look at the failure modes potentially for a cybersecurity breach of my pacemaker. That's pretty highly consequential,
yes.
Right? A video game, maybe not so much. So it's appropriate to empower our sectoral regulators. I think what really is missing in federal government right now, in addition to the codification of that framework, is we need some kind of central repository for testing and evaluation methodologies. So we can't expect all of our sectoral regulators to be experts on AI and the different risks and failure modes that come with it. So we need to equip them with a toolbox of not only testing and evaluation methodologies, but regulatory sandboxes for the testing of potentially malicious AI, pools of technical talent that they can rely on and draw on to give them the expertise that they might not have, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel in each of our different agencies. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's something that we've been talking about for quite a while now, really the importance of having that consistent testing and evaluation methodology and capabilities across companies. So pleased to hear that. We're just about at time, so final wrap-up question for you both. Where do we see AI policy going? Where does it need to go from here, particularly as we think about some of the cybersecurity risks and applications that we were just talking about?
Sure. I think one of the key things is really to ensure that we're incentivizing the adoption of AI, and that we're also ensuring, from a cybersecurity standpoint, that we're not inhibiting the ability of defenders to leverage AI to defend systems, to defend devices, and defend against AI-powered adversaries. And that's something that, not just with AI-specific legislation, but we need to be thinking about that with how we regulate data in general, how we regulate privacy, and how we regulate various sectors to ensure that we're complying with those sorts of principles of protecting everyone, protecting systems, because those stakes will get higher and higher of what happens, what sort of disruption happens if there are attacks, especially when we're talking about an AI era. So it's really important that we're ensuring that we're incentivizing defenders to leverage the best means to protect these systems.
I'll give you a Congress-centric answer to your question. I think that we need to demonstrate to not only our stakeholders, but the states and the public in general that Congress is capable of acting on this topic, because there isn't a lot of faith in us out there right now. And if we fail to act, then we're going to wind up with this complex regulatory landscape of 50 different state standards. That we went over some of the reasons why that would be so destructive. So we need to act together. We need all, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch need to all be pushing in the same direction. And we need to create something not only that makes it clear where the division of responsibility is and enacts the safeguards that need to be enacted, but we need to create something durable because our stakeholders are making billion-dollar capital investments without knowing what the rules are going to be. And they tell me every day, just tell us what the rules are. We would prefer less onerous rules to more onerous, but we will figure out a way to make it work. But what they don't want to have happen is that every few years when the winds of political fortune shift, that the rules completely change around AI governance. And so I think we have the opportunity because the task force report was broadly bipartisan. We got unanimous approval from all 12 of our Republicans, 12 Democrats. The minority leader approved it and his staff. The speaker approved it and his staff. These are the things we can all agree on. And so if we can take those and codify them, we can create something that's durable that people can rely on. And that's I think, the task ahead of us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thank you to both of you. I don't want to run over time, so really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today at the Intersect, and we'll look forward to the future and working together with both Congress and you, CrowdStrike, on advancing this really important topic. So appreciate it.
So much.
Please welcome back Jason Oxman, President and CEO, ITI.
Thank you to the ITI team member who is looking for an excellent year-end review. And thanks to all of you. That concludes our official programming in here, but I have a couple of quick notes for you before we head out to the reception. First of all, and most importantly, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this incredible event and incredible discussion today. The list of luminaries we heard from is too long to mention, but hopefully you've had an opportunity to capture some of them in your LinkedIn and X posts today. Don't forget to use the hashtag, the Intersect 2025 in your posts so you can find them and index them easily. This terrific day would not have been possible without, first and foremost, the terrific ITI team and our partners who made this possible. So please join me in thanking the great team. That, of course, includes our great production team as well. And I also want to thank the ITI member companies whose generous support made this event possible for the third year in a row, the Intersect. And that list of members is Accenture, Amazon, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Ericsson, MasterCard, NetApp, Nielsen, Sage, Salesforce, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Tenable, and Qualcomm. Thank you, and please join me in thanking all of these great companies who made this event possible today. We're going to head out to the reception shortly, and I want to encourage all of you to stay engaged with us. Our website at ITI is itic.org. We are proud to be the trade association of the technology industry, and not only to bring you this great event, but our team of 60 professionals around the world are engaged in advocacy on behalf of the tech industry every day. So please stay connected with us and with the ITI team. And with that, our reception, generously brought to us by ITI member company Tenable, starts right now. We have several special guests from government, including a couple of members of Congress who you'll see there over the course of the afternoon. I invite you to head out the doors and take a left to the reception, and I look forward to seeing you all out there. Thanks so much for a great day.